the wrong bank information on there. Let me change it for you.
Yeah, sure.
You.
Is that first?
Just say
We
that.
have live streaming, everything you say and the actions you take are recorded.
We used to get a jerk board law.
Is there effective PD? Good.
This is actually email. This one is the email.
Oh.
Thanks. Thank you.
We missing today. Tony?
Tony's not coming. Oh, probably a couple of them.
The only way we do that is we let him read it. All the motions. Sold.
Did you say have Keith make all the motions? Exactly. Okay, here we go.
Packet in the mail. There's I got my packet in the mail.
There.
I meant to sign.
Yeah. Good evening. I'd like to call this August meeting of the Lancaster Town Board, zoning board. And please rise for the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Diane, would you take the roll, please?
Mr. Castellano. Mr. Dorenzo.
Here.
Mr. Michaeli.
Here.
Mr. Storr.
Here.
Mr. Sugg.
Here.
Mr. Tillman.
Here.
Chairman Monticelli.
Here. Thank you. Good evening. Welcome to the Zoning Board of Appeals Lancaster August meeting. I just wanted to go over a couple of things so you know what to expect. Quickly, I want to read through the cases in the order that we're going to take them tonight so you know where your case is going to land. We do have a lot. We've got 11 cases tonight, but the last two are commercial enterprises. So if you're here for a residence request, then we will try to get to you as quickly as possible. The first case we're going to hear tonight is 538 Lake Avenue. The second is 5532 William Street. The third one is 729 Pleasant View Drive. The fourth, 398 Stony Road. Fifth is 45 Pear Tree Lane. The sixth one is 47 Heritage Drive. Number 747 Erie Street. Number 845 Deer Path Drive. Number 918 Sagebrush Lane. And then I believe the 10th one is the Walden and Central. Okay, and then the last one is the transit road. Okay. First of all, I want to clarify that if you see any of us looking at our phones or any kind of device during the meeting, it doesn't mean that we're being disrespectful or not paying attention. A lot of times we've taken pictures of the residences to refresh our recollections, or we're looking at Google Earth to get a view of the property. I will call the petitioners up one at a time. Please come to the microphone and give us your name and your address for the record. You will then present your case. The board will ask questions, and then we'll open it up to the audience. If you're in the audience and you have a question, please come up to the microphone. Again, give us your name and address and direct your questions to the board rather than to the petitioner, and we'll try to get the information that you're looking for. Okay, without further ado, would you read us the first matter?
Sure. The first case considered by the Zoning Board of Appeals is that of the petition of Thomas Wierzbowski, 538 Lake Avenue, Lancaster, New York, for one variance for the purpose of constructing a pole barn on premises owned by the petitioner at 538 Lake Avenue, Lancaster, New York, to wit, a variance from the requirements of Chapter 400, Zoning Section 14, Subsection D, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster. The request calls for constructing a 960-square-foot pole barn. Chapter 400, Zoning Section 14, Subsection D, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster requires a maximum structure size of 750 square feet. The petitioner therefore requests a 210-square-foot variance.
Thank you. Mr. Wierzbowski, do you want to come up?
My name is Tom Wierzbowski. I reside at 538 Lake Avenue.
You want to tell us about your project?
I have an existing building there, which is a little bigger than this one. Probably built in the late 40s on pillars. So it is starting to become unsafe, kind of an eyesore for the neighborhood. And I'd like to replace it. Cover all my, I'm a big gardener, rototillers, small fishing boat, 2 snow blowers, small tractor. I do a little refinishing on old furniture and stuff out there. And I have a small house, very small. So everything goes out back.
Thank you. Start with Mr. Dorenzo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Diane, is this the one that we received an email on?
Yes.
Sir, we did receive an email from your neighbor, Mr. Kennard, I believe it was, if I'm not mistaken, in support of your project. I just want to let you know that we did get that.
Okay, and I have this from my other neighbor. He emailed twice, but Diane didn't get it. You want it?
Yes, please. Would you like me to read it for the board?
Yes, please.
I'm Michael Heist at 542 Lake Avenue. Have no issue with Tom Wierzbowski adding additional square feet and the new construction of his pole barn.
Thank you. And for the record, I'll read the one Mr. Dorenzo referred to. I am reaching out on behalf of my neighbor Tom at 538 Lake Avenue. He is putting up a new garage and we received notice in the mail. Unfortunately, I'm not able to make the meeting tomorrow as I work 12 to 9 p.m. But I have absolutely no problem at all with him putting up a new garage with a proposed size. And that is from Jeff Kennard. Anything else, Mr. Dorenzo?
Sir, are you planning on doing any commercial activities out of your new pole barn, if approved?
No, I'm retired. I grow tomatoes and fish.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Madam Chair. No further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Dorenzo. Mr. Michaeli?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no questions.
Thank you, Mr. Michaeli. Mr. Storr?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No questions.
Thank you, Mr. Storr. Mr. Sugg?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Wazowski, are you going to be storing any other items for people that you don't know, like RVs, boats, anything like that going on?
No, when I get all mine in there, there'll be
Okay.
room for the cat. That'll be about it.
No further questions?
Thank you, Mr. Sugg. Mr. Tillmans?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no questions.
Thank you, Mr. Tillmans. Mr. Wurzbowski, we met at your house and you showed me the structure that needs to come down and where the new one is going to go. I just wanted to let you know I did check out the barn kitty corner from your house that you referred to and said it would be similar to that. It's a real nice building. I have no concerns about.
It'll be done by the same builder too,
Same-
Stately from
yeah.
Clarence.
Yeah, it's a real nice looking building, so I think that this will be fine. All right, anyone in the audience have any questions? All right. There being none,
I'll make a motion.
Mr. Sugg, thank you.
Whereas the Zoning Board of Appeals of the Town of Lancaster has made the following findings, that no undesirable change will be produced in the character of the neighborhood by granting the area variance relief sought, that no detriment to nearby properties will be created by the granting of the area variance relief sought, that the benefits sought by the applicants cannot be achieved by some other method feasible for the applicant to pursue other than the area variance relief sought, that the requested area variance relief is not substantial, that the proposed area variance relief will not have an adverse effect or impact on the physical or environmental conditions in the neighborhood or district, that the alleged difficulty is self-created but not to the extent necessary to preclude the granting of the area variance relief sought, that this board has taken into consideration the benefit to the applicants that the variance relief sought is granted as weighed against the detriment to health, safety, and welfare of the neighborhood or community by such grant, that within the intent and purposes of this ordinance, the variance relief sought, if granted, is the minimum variance necessary to afford relief.
Second.
Second, Mr. Michaeli, thank you. Diane, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Dorenzo.
Yes.
Mr. Michaeli.
Yes.
Mr. Storr.
Yes.
Mr. Sugg.
Yes.
Mr. Tillmans.
Yes.
Ms. Monticelli.
Yes. Okay, you are all set, Mr. Wurzbowski. Just get in touch with the building department, and they will direct you from there,
Okay.
okay?
Thank you
Good luck
very
with your
much.
project. Diane, when you're ready, would you read the next notice, please?
The second case considered by the Zoning Board of Appeals is that of the petition of Lucas James, 43 Conrad Street, Depew, New York, for one variance for the purpose of creating a parcel within the AR district on premises owned by the petitioner at 0 William Street, Lancaster, New York, to wit. A variance from the requirements of Chapter 400 zoning Section 13, subsection C, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster. The request calls for creating a parcel within the AR district 250 feet wide. Chapter 400 zoning Section 13, subsection C, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster requires a minimum lot width of 300 feet if abutting a dedicated street. The petitioner therefore requests a 50-foot variance.
Thank you. Is Lucas James here, or a representative?
Good evening.
Good evening. Will you give us your name and address for the record, please?
Sure. Lucas James, 43 Conrad Street, Depew, New York.
Okay, and tell us about your project and your variance request, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So I purchased this lot in 2018, I believe it was, and had intentions to build my own personal residence on the property. And I found out last year that the lot was actually technically created illegally by the seller of the property. Matt can jump in whenever he wants to. But it is a larger than normal parcel. It's 250 wide. It's 3 acres, so it's a very large parcel. He was actually selling off a smaller parcel, and I convinced him to make it much larger to sell to me. And so I went to go pull a building permit last year. I had building plans all set, and Matt informed me that it was created illegally. The seller was supposed to have gone through this very process I'm doing now to create a minor subdivision in order to parcel off this one piece of property off of his much larger piece that he had. So in finding that out, we asked the seller to, to go through this process because he should be responsible for it. He refused, and so I'm stuck doing it here for him, on behalf of him. So he signed a letter saying that I could do it on his behalf. It should have been done 4 years ago. It was not. And then since that time, I think in 2020, I believe, that the minimum lot size changed in that AR district to being 300 wide instead of what it was, which I think is 150, something like that. So it's just a little bit smaller than the new regulation lot size created in 2020. And I did buy it in 2018. Any questions?
Just to clarify, the owner is Jody Banasic?
That's it's her, I guess technically her, but more formally her husband that I purchased it from, yes.
Okay, and they live on the other side of the lot?
Yep.
At 5534. The reason I mention it is just for the record, we do have authorization from Jody Banasic. The grantor in a parcel of vacant land situated on William Street in the town of Lancaster, New York, bearing SBL 116.00-2-70, does hereby authorize Lucas James, residing at 43 Conrad Street, Depew, New York, 14043. The grantee of such parcel is set forth in Lieber 11324 of deeds at page 2381 to be the applicant in an application for a small subdivision approval covering such parcel. And then she goes on to mention the attorney. Okay, anything else you'd like to tell us?
No, I think that's it. Pretty simple, just a lot being created in a technically different, not correct way a few years ago.
Matt, did you want to add anything before we get started?
No, it was pretty accurate.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right, let's start with Mr. Michaeli, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The one thing I don't get is the letter you have from Jody, as you just said, her last name, Banasic. I'm looking at the county GIS, and it shows this parcel in your name already.
Yeah, I
And
purchased.
she owns the larger, like 43-acre parcel next door.
Right, yeah, so I actually, like I said, I purchased the property in 2018, I already own it.
Yeah.
The issue was when I went to pull a building permit,
Sure.
Matt informed me that it was illegally created technically by her or him at that time.
Okay.
So it should be in my name at this point.
Yeah, so I don't think we need that letter, because he does own this parcel. It's ready, you're ready to own it.
Right, but I'm actually acting on behalf of the whole property to divide out this little section of it. But I had to obtain a survey of like the whole property, even though I don't own the whole property.
Are you buying the larger parcel too?
No, I'm just a small little
Okay.
section, yeah.
Okay, good, thank you. I have no more questions.
Thank you. Mr. Storr?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No questions.
Thank you, Mr. Storr. Mr. Sugg?
Thank you, Madam Chair, no questions.
Thank you, Mr. Sugg. Mr. Tillmans?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So when she says small subdivision, I mean, is that because they're looking to subdivide this larger lot? Is
It's-
that essentially what's going to happen?
It's
or what's-
misleading, yeah. I'm going through a minor subdivision process, but it's just
because of
one
your
lot.
parcel?
Yeah,
Okay.
just one lot.
I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tillmans. Mr. Durenzo?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And then to further expound upon that, so you're building one lot, or you're subdividing this into one parcel to build one house for yourself, for your primary residence?
Yeah, I don't own the whole big property. I'm just the small one, yeah.
Okay, and you'll be applying for a building permit to build one house on it?
Yeah, just one house, yep, personal residence, single family, my own.
Okay,
Yeah, I already tried, but wasn't able to.
thank you. No further questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Durenzo. I have no questions. Anyone in the audience care to comment or ask any questions? Yes.
Yeah, my name is
Sir.
Lawrence. Yeah, my name is Lawrence Bartos. I live at the property
Yes, okay.
5530 William Street, which is less.
Can you come up to the microphone,
Yeah,
please?
this thing, I just want to know, does this in any way, shape, or form affect my property? I've owned the property there since 2017, a single house resident. I just want to know in any way, shape, or form. It doesn't sound like it does. And the way that I read the variance, she's actually asking for a variance to have a smaller piece, if I'm understanding, than what the regulation states. I just want to know if this in any way, shape, or form affects my property.
Okay, let me just divert for a minute. Did you get the name and address?
Nope.
Okay, would you state your name and address?
Lawrence Bartos, 5530 William Street in Lancaster.
Thank you. Matt, can we direct that question to you?
Well, it's not going to physically affect your property.
Okay.
It's specifically splitting up an existing parcel
Okay.
and creating a sub-parcel off of that.
That's fine. Yeah, that's what I got out of it. I just wanted to verify. So, okay.
Okay, any
Thank
other
you.
questions?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Anyone else in the audience? There being none, we'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Keith.
You're welcome. Whereas the zoning board of appeals of the town of Lancaster has made the following findings, that no undesirable change will be produced in the character of the neighborhood by the granting of the area variance relief sought, that no detriment to nearby properties will be created by the granting of the area variance relief sought, that the benefit sought by the applicant cannot be achieved by some other method feasible for the applicant to pursue other than the area variance relief sought, that the requested area variance relief sought is not substantial, that the proposed area variance relief sought will not have an adverse effect on the impact on the physical or environmental conditions of the neighborhood or district, that the alleged difficulty is not self-created and not to the extent necessary to preclude the granting of the area variance relief sought, that this board has taken into consideration the benefit to the applicants if the area variance relief sought is granted as weighted against the detriment to the health, safety, and welfare of the neighborhood or community by such grant, that within the intent and purpose of this ordinance, the variance relief sought, if granted, is the minimum variance necessary to afford relief.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Thank you, Mr. Dorenzo. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Dorenzo.
Yes.
Mr. Michaeli.
Yes.
Mr. Storr.
Yes.
Mr. Sugg.
Yes.
Mr. Tillmans.
Yes.
Ms. Monticelli.
Yes. Okay, congratulations, Mr. James. Your request has been approved. You just need to contact the building department on how to proceed.
Thank you. Have a
Thank
great
you.
night. Thank you.
You too. All right, would you read the next notice for us, please, Diane?
The third case considered by the zoning board of appeals is that of the petition of Patricia Melancon, 729 Pleasant View Drive, Lancaster, New York, for one variance for the purpose of constructing a wood deck on premises owned by the petitioner at 729 Pleasant View Drive, Lancaster, New York, to wit. A variance from the requirements of Chapter 400 zoning Section 14, subsection D, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster. The request calls for constructing a real wood deck 2.41 feet from the side property line. Chapter 400, zoning section 14, subsection D, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster requires a minimum side yard width for dwellings up to 35 feet in height, each side yard the lesser of 10% of the lot width, or 10 feet, or the total side yard the lesser of 25% of the lot width, or 25 feet. The petitioner therefore requests a 5.81 foot variance.
Thank you. Want to come up, please? Good evening.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. My name is Pat Melanson. My husband and I moved into the home on 729 Pleasant View Drive about 1.5 years ago. It's a lovely ranch, and in the back corner of the building, on the east-south two sides, there's a small, I think it's 8 by 10 approximately, sunroom with not exposed, but sliding glass doors facing a yard. And there's very little shade in that yard. So my intention is to put on a deck, which will extend the sun porch into a living area and cover it with an awning so that we can actually use it. It's hard to use that yard right now. So I'm asking for a few extra feet just to make the deck a little more usable than if I had to move back to the recommended amount.
Okay. Thank you. We'll start with Mr. Storr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I currently have no questions.
Thank you, Mr. Storr. Mr. Suggs?
The only question I have is, if your neighbor to the one side made any comments at all or any concerns on their end?
There is no neighbor on that side of the house, and the other neighbor is barely visible. He'll get to see a very little cornered part of my deck, and that's about it.
Okay. Thank you.
Totally vacant.
Mr. Tillmans?
I have no questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Durenzo?
Thank you, Madam Chair, no questions.
And Mr. Michaely?
Thank you, Madam Chair, no questions.
Thank you, Mr. Michaely. This is back on. All right. I had the opportunity to speak with Ms. Melanson and see her projected project, and it seems very reasonable to me. You're wanting to put in a ramp rather than stairs?
No, I am going to have stairs with a railing, something to hold on to.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So, yeah, it seems reasonable to me, so we'll proceed for a motion. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Is there anyone in the audience that has any questions or comments? There being none, now we'll call for a motion.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
Whereas the zoning board of appeals of the town of Lancaster has made the following findings, that no undesirable change will be produced in the character of the neighborhood by the granting of the area variance relief sought, that no detriment to nearby properties will be created by the granting of the area variance relief sought, that the benefit sought by the applicant cannot be achieved by some other method feasible for the applicant to pursue other than the area variance relief sought, that the requested area variance relief is not substantial, that the proposed area variance relief will not have an adverse effect or impact on the physical or environmental conditions in the neighborhood or district, that the alleged difficulty is not self-created, that this board has taken into consideration the benefit to the applicants if the variance relief sought is granted as weighed against the detriment to the health, safety, and welfare of the neighborhood or community by such grant, that within the intent and purposes of this ordinance, the variance relief sought, if granted, is the minimum variance necessary to afford relief.
Thank you.
Second that.
Thank you, Mr. Sugg. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Durenzo.
Yes.
Mr. Michaely.
Yes.
Mr. Storr.
Yes.
Mr. Sugg.
Yes.
Mr. Tillmans.
Yes.
Ms. Monticelli.
Yes. Okay, Ms. Melanson,
Thank you very much.
you're welcome, and just get in touch. Your next step is to get in touch with the building department.
Building department.
Okay.
Okay.
The permit
Thank
can be
you.
available tomorrow morning for you.
Oh, great, I'll be there.
All the documentation is in. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay, can we have the next notice, please?
The fourth case considered by the zoning board of appeals is that of the petition of Michael Pokorski, 398 Stony Road, Lancaster, New York, for one variance for the purpose of constructing a pole barn on premises owned by the petitioner at 398 Stony Road, Lancaster, New York, to wit, a variance from the requirements of Chapter 400 zoning Section 13, subsection C, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster. The request calls for constructing a 1,848 square foot pole barn. Chapter 400 zoning Section 13, subsection C, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster requires a maximum accessory structure of 1,250 square feet. The petitioner therefore requests a 598 square foot variance.
Thank you. Mr. Pokorski?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Michael Pokorski, 398 Stony Road, Lancaster, New York. And I'm looking to build a pole barn, a little bit out of the square footage of what they say. The only comment I can make is that I have a 8-foot awning that's 44 feet long, and that's being included as square footage too. It's not enclosed, but it's being counted in the square footage. Over the years, I've acquired some equipment, bulldozer, tractor, boat. I've got 5 acres, and I maintain trails there for my grandchildren and stuff like that. And I'm just looking to store everything out of sight. I like keeping everything neat and orderly, and I'm hoping I get the variance.
Okay, anything else?
Any questions?
Well, let's find out. Mr. Sugg, you want to start us off?
I'm
Beat
gonna,
me to the punch, yeah.
Yeah, it's.
The only question I have is, will you be storing anybody else's items?
No, just mine.
That's all. No more questions.
Thank you. Mr. Tillmans?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Are you planning to run any commercial operations out of this?
No, sir.
Okay. I have no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tillmans. Mr. Durenzo?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I noticed, I noticed in your application that you put one of our favorite sayings here in your application, happy wife, happy life. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, I
We
figured.
appreciate that.
That's true.
I also noticed that you talked about the fact that it will not be one color and it won't be a square box, so you want to give us a little
Right.
description
Yep.
of that, please?
Pardon me?
You want to describe what it's going to
Yeah, I actually have a rendering. It's not the exact same colors, but it'll be two-tone. I'll have a cupola on top. I just don't want a square box. My wife won't let me have a square box. It's got to look presentable, and it's going to have the wainscot on the bottom, and it's going to be two-tone, and it'll have a cupola on top, and I'll try to keep it and maintain it as well as I can.
Have you selected a color scheme yet?
Yeah, it's going to be like a red and brown. My neighbor up on the hill has one, Dave Bauer, and it's going to be the same color as his.
Okay. All right. Thank you. No further questions, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Durenzo. Mr. Mike
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a comment that reading your comments here, you had a very well put together application. Reading your comments actually made me smile and laugh, which doesn't happen often in reading these. And you have a very large parcel. I don't see that it's impacting any of the neighbors, so that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mike Mr. Storr?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just because it's going to be close to your property line with 390 Stony, have you spoken to your neighbors at all?
Yeah, I've talked to Daniel, and I should have gotten a letter, but he had no problem with it at all.
Okay. You said Dean Bauer is your neighbor on the other side?
Yeah, Dave Bauer.
Oh, okay. Never mind. I thought it was a different.
Yeah, no.
Okay. No further questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Storr. We met at the property, and I saw where you had laid it out. It is indeed behind the house, back behind the house, and I don't think it'll be visible to anyone unless they pull into your driveway.
Right.
So, let's see, and nope, I don't have any other questions. So anyone in the audience have questions or comments on this petition? All right, there being none,
I'll make a motion.
thank you, Mr. Trenza.
Whereas the Zoning Board of Appeals of the Town of Lancaster has made the following findings: that no undesirable change will be produced in the character of the neighborhood by the granting of the area variance relief sought, that no detriment to nearby properties will be created by the granting of the area variance relief sought, that the benefits sought by the applicant cannot be achieved by some other method feasible for the applicant to pursue other than the area variance relief sought, that the requested area variance relief is substantial, that the proposed area variance relief will not have an adverse effect or impact on the physical or environmental conditions in the neighborhood or district, that the alleged difficulty is self-created but not to the extent necessary to preclude the granting of the area variance relief sought, that this board has taken into consideration the benefit to the applicant if the variance relief sought is granted as weighed against the detriment to the health, safety, and welfare of the neighborhood or community by such grant, that within the intent and purposes of this ordinance, the variance relief sought, if granted, is the minimum variance necessary to afford relief, that no commercial enterprise other than those permitted by Chapter 400 of the Code of the Town of Lancaster be conducted on the premises.
Thank you, Mr. Trenzo.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr. Sugg. And may we have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Durenzo.
Yes.
Mr. Michaeli.
Yes.
Mr. Storr.
Yes.
Mr. Sugg.
Yes.
Mr. Tillmans.
Yes.
Ms. Monticelli.
Yes. Okay, you are all set with your variance. It's been granted. Just contact the
have to
building
deal with Matt.
department. Yeah, deal with-
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
You're welcome. You too. Okay, may we have the notice for the fifth case, please?
Fifth case considered by the Zoning Board of Appeals is that of the petition of Kevin Sanford, 45 Pear Tree Lane, Lancaster, New York, for 3 variances for the purpose of installing an in-ground pool, a shed, and a privacy fence on premises owned by the petitioner at 45 Pear Tree Lane, Lancaster, New York, to wit: A a variance from the requirements of Chapter 400 zoning Section 14, subsection D, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster. The request calls for installing an in-ground pool 6 feet from a patio roof structure. Chapter 400 zoning Section 14, subsection D, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster requires an accessory structure to be a minimum of 10 feet from another structure. The petitioner therefore requests a 4-foot variance. B, a variance from the requirements of Chapter 400 zoning Section 14, subsection D, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster. The request calls for installing a shed 3 feet from the side property line. Chapter 400 zoning Section 14, subsection D, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster requires an accessory structure to be a minimum of 5 feet from the side lot line. The petitioner therefore requests a 2-foot variance. C, a variance from the requirements of Chapter 400 zoning Section 34, subsection C of the Code of the Town of Lancaster. The request calls for installing a 6-foot-tall privacy fence. Chapter 400 zoning Section 34, subsection C of the Code of the Town of Lancaster requires within non-industrial districts no fence or wall other than a retaining wall over 3 feet in height shall extend into the front yard of any lot. The petitioner therefore requests a 3-foot variance.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Kevin Sanford. I live at 45 Pear Tree Lane, Lancaster. So I'll start with the last, I know there's 3 here, I'll start with the last one. So I live on a dead-end street on the corner lot. It's Pear Tree and Crabapple. So what I'm looking to do is put a 6-foot privacy fence on that side, just because, for one thing, privacy, for another thing, for safety, because I am installing an in-ground pool. The concern there is with the kids are playing on that dead-end street, obviously don't want them to hop that fence or anything, so obviously a 6-foot fence versus a 3-foot fence would secure that much more than a shorter fence. And then I have a patio roof, and then there's a deck with there, so what I'm trying to do with that pool, the in-ground pool, is put as close to that deck as possible so I don't need additional concrete. And then when people walk out to that pool, they don't have to walk as far to get into that pool as well. And the shed, I'm looking for a minimal variance there just because, again, just trying to maximize the property space. When I originally bought the property, the main reason why was the lot size. It's a bigger lot size than most of the ones in the area, and I did purchase it for a premium, and I want to take advantage of that lot size as well. So putting that shed on the other side, and putting what I'm going to do is put the fence, and it's going to connect to that shed, so I'm maximizing that property space.
Okay, anything else?
That's it.
Okay. Let's go to the board. Mr. Tillmans?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I see that your property butts up to a drainage easement.
Correct.
Is there any concrete or anything from the pool or shed going to be going into that easement?
No, and then the fence on that side is going to be 20 feet from that easement as required by the town.
Okay. Right. I have no further questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Tillman. Mr. Drenzo?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No questions.
Thank you, Mr. Drenzo. Mr. Michaeli?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no questions.
Thank you, Mr. Michaeli. Mr. Storr?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no questions.
Thank you, Mr. Storr. And Mr. Sugg?
No, thank you, Madam Chair. I have no questions either. Thank you for the explanation.
Thank you. Mr. Sanford, I came to your house and I met with your dad, so he was able to, very nice. He was able to show me where you have laid out some bricks. But I'm just curious, the request for installing this shed, excuse me, you're seeking a 2-foot variance. What would the harm be of just moving in the 2 feet?
Well, to be honest with you, the biggest thing was the fence, and then the pool was second, and the shed was third. So, again, maximizing that property space. So I was here doing the fence. I was like, well, if I can get that on the other side as well. Because, again, I'm coming in 2 feet to begin with. And again, that fence, or that fence is going to attach to that shed, so that's why I just wanted to do that as well.
Okay, and let's see, you are at 45 Pear Tree.
And that's on the other, that's not on the side of Crabapple, that's on the other
Right,
side.
the shed will be on the corner?
Right.
Okay, all right. Did you happen to talk to, let's see, is it
Mary Ann.
Marion
Yep.
Dahlgren?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
She
she's
had
okay.
no
Yeah, no
concerns? Okay, and explain to us again, please, why you don't just move the pool back another 4 feet?
Well, again, I have concrete already, a deck, and the plan was to get that pool as close to that deck as possible, so they don't have to have additional concrete. So if I'm coming in from that deck, instead of 10 feet, 6 feet, 4 feet less, then that's going all the way, or that side of the pool.
Okay.
And again, it's just easier, I mean, 6 feet is 6 feet, but then people don't have to walk as far to get to the pool.
Oh, walk as far, okay. All right. Matt, any comments on this? Okay, thank you. Anyone in the audience care to comment or ask a question? And seeing no one, we will...
Make a motion.
Mr. Tillmans will make the motion. Thank you.
Whereas the zoning board of appeals of the town of Lancaster has made the following findings, that no undesirable change will be produced in the character of the neighborhood by the granting of the area variance relief sought, that no detriment to nearby properties will be created by the granting of the area variance relief sought, that the benefits sought by the applicant cannot be achieved by some other method feasible for the applicant to pursue other than the area variance relief sought, that the requested area variance relief is not substantial, that the proposed area variance relief will not have an adverse effect or impact on the physical or environmental conditions in the neighborhood or district, that the alleged difficulty is self-created, but not to the extent necessary to preclude the granting of the area variance relief sought, that this board has taken into consideration the benefit to the applicants if the variance relief sought is granted as weighed against the detriment to the health, safety, and welfare of the neighborhood or community by such grant. That within the intent and purposes of this ordinance, the variance relief sought, if granted, is the minimum variance necessary to afford relief. That such fence will not unduly shut out light or air to adjoining properties, and that such fence will not create a fire hazard by reason of its construction or location.
Thank you, Mr. Tillman.
I'll second that.
Second by Mr. Sugg. Thank you. And just to divert for 1 second, none of us remembered to ask you what kind of fence this will be.
Well, it's going to be a vinyl privacy fence.
Vinyl, white vinyl
Yes.
privacy? Okay, thank you. Okay, we have a motion and a second. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Dorenzo?
Yes.
Mr. Michaeli?
Yes.
Mr. Storr?
Yes.
Mr. Sugg?
Yes.
Mr. Tillmans?
Yes.
Ms. Monticelli?
Yes. Okay, Mr. Sanford, your request has been, all of your variance requests have been granted, so as you've probably heard, your next step is the building department.
Okay, and then they work with the pool contractor then to get the pool installed then? Okay, all right, thanks a lot. Have a
Okay,
good
thank
evening.
you. Good night. Okay, would you read us the notice for the 6th case, please?
The sixth case considered by the zoning board of appeals is that of the petition of Paul Kuznick, 47 Heritage Drive, Lancaster, New York, for one variance for the purpose of adding a garage addition on premises owned by the petitioner at 47 Heritage Drive, Lancaster, New York, to wit, a variance from the requirements of Chapter 400 zoning Section 14, subsection D, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster. The request calls for adding a garage addition 5 feet from a side property line. Chapter 400 zoning Section 14, subsection D, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster requires a minimum side yard width for dwellings up to 35 feet in height, each side yard the lesser of 10% of the lot width, or 10 feet, which equals 7.5 feet. The petitioner therefore requests a 2.5-foot variance.
Thank you. Is there someone for 47 Heritage? Hi, come on up.
My name is Paul Kuznick. I do reside at 47 Heritage. I'm looking for this variance because my lot is a pie shape. So it goes out in the backyard. The back of the garage will be 10 feet away from the fence, but I just needed this variance at the front of the garage. We're always upgrading this house. We're constantly doing stuff to this house. So this is the next step, hopefully the last.
Okay. Anything else you need to tell us?
No.
Okay. All right. Mr. Dorenzo, will you start us off, please?
Sure, no questions.
Okay, Mr. Michaeli?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, a quick question, and Matt, could you help me with this, interpreting the code? Code requires, this lot is 60 foot wide, so code requires minimum side yard width for dwellings up to 35 feet high. Each side yard is the lesser of 10%, or the lot width or 10 feet, 7 foot 5. Wouldn't it be, so if this is a 60 foot wide, wouldn't it be 6 foot?
No, the building line at the setback is the equivalent of the 75 foot as the originally designed when the subdivision was mapped out.
Okay.
So your interior corner lots, cul-de-sac lots, they rely on that 75 foot width at the setback line, not so much at the front property line.
Interesting, okay. I have no other questions, except did you speak, you've heard us ask about neighbors. You have a neighbor here on the...
I've talked to all the neighbors. They're fine with it, both sides, and down the street, across the street, across the mall.
Well, they wouldn't care, but yeah. Okay, no more questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Michaeli. Mr. Storr?
Thank you, Madam Chair, no questions.
Thank you. Mr. Sugg?
Thank you, Madam Chair, no questions.
Mr. Tillmans?
Thank you, Madam Chair, I have no questions.
Thank you. I have no questions either. So anyone in the audience care to comment or have any questions about this request? Okay, there being none, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion. Whereas the zoning
Storr.
board of appeals of the town of Lancaster has made the following findings, that no undesirable change will be produced in the character of the neighborhood by the granting of the area variance relief sought, that no detriment to nearby properties will be created by the granting of the area variance relief sought, that the benefits sought by the applicant cannot be achieved by some other method feasible for the applicant to pursue other than the area variance relief sought, that the requested area variance relief sought is not substantial, that the proposed area variance relief sought will not have an adverse effect or impact on the physical or environmental conditions in the neighborhood or district, that the alleged difficulty is self-created, but not to the extent necessary to preclude the granting of the area variance relief sought, that this board has taken into consideration the benefit to the applicants if the area variance relief sought is granted as weighted against the detriment to the health, safety, and welfare of the neighborhood or community by such grant, that within the intent and purposes of this ordinance, the variance relief sought, if granted, is the minimum variance necessary to afford relief, that no commercial enterprise other than those permitted by Chapter 400 of the Code of the Town of Lancaster will be conducted on the premises.
Thank you, Mr. Storr.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Mr. Sugg. Second. Okay, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Dorenzo?
Yes.
Mr. Michaeli?
Yes.
Mr. Storr?
Yes.
Mr. Sugg?
Yes.
Mr. Tillmans?
Yes.
Ms. Monticelli?
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Good night. Okay, would you read us the seventh notice, please?
The seventh case considered by the Zoning Board of Appeals is that of the petition of David Watson, 747 Erie Street, Lancaster, New York, for 3 variances for the purpose of constructing a pool house on premises owned by the petitioner at 747 Erie Street, Lancaster, New York, to wit: A, a variance from the requirements of Chapter 400 zoning, Section 13, subsection C, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster. The request calls for constructing a 14 by 16-foot pool house 8 feet from an in-ground pool. Chapter 400 zoning, Section 13, subsection C, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster requires a minimum location of an accessory structure from another structure of 10 feet. The petitioner therefore requests a 2-foot variance. B, a variance from the requirements of Chapter 400 zoning, Section 13, subsection C, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster. The request calls for constructing a 14 by 16-foot pool house 8 feet from an existing shed. Chapter 400, zoning section 13, subsection C, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster, requires a minimum location of an accessory structure from another structure of 10 feet. The petitioner therefore requests a 2-foot variance. Excuse me. C, a variance from the requirements of Chapter 400, zoning section 13, subsection C, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster. The request calls for constructing a 14 by 16-foot pool house 5 feet from the side lot line. Chapter 400, zoning section 13, subsection C, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster requires a minimum location of an accessory structure of 15 feet from a side lot line. The petitioner therefore requests a 10-foot variance.
Thank you, Diane.
Good evening, Board. My name's David Watson. I live at 747 Erie Street. That's where we're putting the pool house. We kind of call it the cabana as well. As you know, Western New York summers don't last very long, and so I'm really trying. We have a beautiful in-ground pool. We're trying to kind of extend that season by having a structure out there that on cooler days we can enjoy patio furniture and be somewhat enclosed from the wind and everything. And it's also a structure that we hope to use when we have gatherings and parties over there, that it's another sitting place, again, for people to enjoy our pool in our backyard. As far as the property line goes in that variance, the shed that we currently have in the pool itself, the new structure would not be any closer to the property line than those two are already. So we're looking for the variances as far as the pool. Another reason where we're putting it is it does butt up against the current pool concrete, so we're not trying to create another need for building some kind of deck or pouring more concrete. And then if we also move it back, what happens is we get closer to the current shed. So we're kind of like trying to sandwich it into the place that makes the sense out of enjoying the yard.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Michael, you want to get started?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Michael. And Mr. Storr?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No questions.
Thank you, Mr. Storr. Mr. Sugg?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No questions.
Thank you. Mr. Tillmans?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no questions.
Thank you, Mr. Tillmans. Mr. Duranzo?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Watson, in your application, you talked about all the constraints were there when you bought the property. When did you buy the property?
2002?
2002?
Yeah.
Thank you. And then I also see, I think you just spoke to this, but the reason that you're would like to place the pool house there is basically to maximize the rest of the lot, right? Still have the rest of the lot available to you?
Right. There's really no other place. If we put it on one side, then it goes onto the neighbor's property. If we put it on the other end of the pool, then we all have all the utilities, the pumps, and everything there, so it doesn't make sense to put it there. And then if we do put it on the other side, it's like right in the middle of the property.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's what I figured off of this and your application. Just wanted to make sure. All right. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Madam Chair. No further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Duranzo. Mr. Watson, who's the gardener?
Both of us.
Yeah? It is gorgeous. The most beautiful flowers. But what am I to understand that you want to put this between the shed and the pool?
Yes.
Okay, so you would be taking out all of the
one bed we would,
greenery.
yeah, there's one bed we would have to take out.
That's a shame because it really is gorgeous.
Yeah, well, we can always make another bed.
Yeah. All right, I don't have any questions. I just wanted to make sure I was
And thank you
looking at
for
this
that
correctly.
comment.
Yeah, it's really stunning. Okay, any questions from anyone in the audience? All right, there being none,
I'll make a motion.
thank you.
Whereas the zoning board of appeals of the town of Lancaster has made the following findings, that no undesirable change will be produced in the character of the neighborhood by granting the area variance relief sought, that no detriment to nearby properties will be created by the granting of the area relief sought, that the benefits sought by the applicants cannot be achieved by some other method feasible for the applicant to pursue other than the area variance relief sought, that the requested area variance relief is not substantial, that the proposed area variance relief will not have an adverse effect or impact on the physical or environmental conditions in the neighborhood or district, that the alleged difficulty is self-created but not to the extent necessary to preclude the granting of the area variance relief sought, that this board is taking consideration the benefit to the applicants if the variance relief sought is granted is weighed against the detriment to health, safety, and welfare of the neighborhood or community by such grant, that within the intent and purposes of this ordinance, the variance relief sought, if granted, is the minimum variance necessary to afford relief.
Thank you, Mr. Sugg.
I'll second.
Mr. Dorenzo, thank you. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Dorenzo.
Yes.
Mr. Michaely.
Yes.
Mr. Storr.
Yes.
Mr. Sugg.
Yes.
Mr. Tillman.
Yes.
Ms. Monticelli.
Yes. Okay,
Thank you,
we're all
Board.
set. Thank you. Okay, Diane, would you read the 8th notice, please?
The eighth case considered by the Zoning Board of Appeals is that of petition of Matthew Sidor, 318 Broselle Avenue, Lancaster, New York, for one variance for the purpose of installing a privacy fence on premises under contract to purchase by the petitioner at 45 Deer Path Drive, Lancaster, New York. A variance from the requirements of Chapter 400 zoning Section 34, subsection C of the Code of the Town of Lancaster. The request calls for installing a 6-foot tall privacy fence in a required front yard. Chapter 400 zoning Section 34, subsection C of the Code of the Town of Lancaster requires within non-industrial districts, no fence or wall other than a retaining wall over 3 feet in height shall extend into the front yard of any lot. The petitioner therefore requests a 3-foot variance.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you. I'm Matthew Sidor of 318 Broselle. We are still under contract for 45 Deer Path. Our closing date is set for the 17th of August. So next Wednesday, we're going to close on it. Everything's going fine. And I do believe that the current property owner, Nicole, sent an email saying that she was okay with us applying for this permit. Construction won't start until after we move into the property. So we are requesting a 3-foot variance because this is on a corner lot. So it's the corner of Deer Path and Pheasant Run. And so the fenced area will only need the variance on the Pheasant Run side. So when we purchased the property, we considered it part of the back/side yard. Our house faces Deer Path. We already talked about this with our contractor when he came out and did the quote. We pushed the fence back 9 feet from the sidewalk. That way it didn't hinder any oncoming traffic, or there's a house next door. They can still have lots of visibility to pull out of their driveway. The reasons why we're trying to get the 6-foot fence instead of a 3-foot is we have 3 rescue dogs. One is a self-proclaimed Frisbee champion and can jump very high, and so she could get over a 3-foot fence with no problem. Then we also have one who is a 3-legged dog, and we're trying to avoid any other animals getting into the property because he can't move as quickly. And for the record, he is my favorite dog that we have in the house. So I just wanted that to show here. We are also expecting our first child in October, so we'd like to have a little bit more property and some space for her in the yard. We did go down all of Pheasant Run, and there were about 5 or 6 different properties that were in the same situation on corner lots, had over a 6-foot fence, and most of them were within 4 to 6 feet of the sidewalk.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. Mr. Michaely, did you start us last time?
No, I'll go now. Thank you, Madam Chair. Congratulations on the house. Congratulations on the baby. You're not supposed to have a favorite dog, although my wife knows which one of our dogs is my favorite. That's all I have.
She has her favorite, too.
That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Michaeli. And I just wanted to verify for the record that we did receive a letter from Nicole Kotlick, the current owner of the property, saying that she had no problem with Mr. Sider making this request. Okay, Mr. Storr?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Congrats on the baby. Congrats on the house. No further questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Storr. Mr. Sugg?
I have no questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Sugg. Mr. Tillmans?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no questions.
Thank you. Mr. Dorenzo?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Congratulations to both of you as well.
Thank you.
I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And this is a privacy fence, it's solid? Okay.
It's a wood stockade fence.
White stockade, thank you.
Wood.
I'm sorry.
Wood.
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 Thank you. Yeah. Okay, great. And yes, congratulations on the baby and becoming homeowners. And you said her?
Her.
Expecting a girl?
Yep.
All right, all right. And on behalf of rescue dogs everywhere, thank you for doing your part. That's great, especially with the three-legged one. Okay, anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? Okay, there being none, do we have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Michaeli.
Whereas the zoning board of appeals of the town of Lancaster has made the following findings, that no undesirable change will be produced in the character of the neighborhood by the granting of the area variance relief sought, that no detriment to nearby properties will be created by the granting of the area variance relief sought, that the benefit sought by the applicant cannot be achieved by some other method feasible for the applicant to pursue other than the area variance relief sought, that the requested area variance relief is not substantial, that the proposed area variance relief will not have an adverse effect or impact on the physical or environmental conditions in the neighborhood or district, that the alleged difficulty is self-created but not to the extent necessary to preclude the granting of the area variance relief sought, that this board has taken into consideration the benefit to the applicant if the variance relief sought is granted as weighed against the detriment to the health, safety, and welfare of the neighborhood or community by such grant, that within the intent and purposes of this ordinance, the variance relief sought, if granted, is the minimum variance necessary to afford relief, and that such fence will not unduly shut out light or air to adjoining properties, that such fence will not create a fire hazard by reason of its construction or location.
Thank you.
A second.
I'm sorry.
Second.
Second, Mr. Tillmans? And roll call vote, please.
Mr. Dorenzo?
Yes.
Mr. Michaeli?
Yes.
Mr. Storr?
Yes.
Mr. Sugg?
Yes.
Mr. Tillmans?
Yes.
Ms. Monticelli?
Yes. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Your request has been granted. You know to call the building department, and good luck with everything.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too. And would you read the ninth case, please, Diane?
The ninth case considered by the zoning board of appeals is that of the petition of Martin Shabluski, 18 Sagebrush Lane, Lancaster, New York, for one variance for the purpose of installing a shed pad within a public drainage easement on premises owned by the petitioner at 18 Sagebrush Lane, Lancaster, New York, to wit, a variance from the requirements of Chapter 400 zoning, Section 14, subsection C, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster. The request calls for installing a shed pad within a public drainage easement. Chapter 400, zoning section 14, subsection C, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster requires no structures other than fencing be allowed within any drainage access easement. The petitioner therefore requests a 2-foot public drainage easement variance.
Thank you. Is the petitioner here?
Good evening. My name is Marty Shabluski. I reside at 18 Sagebrush Lane in Lancaster. I've been in the community since 1997, purchased my home, built my home, and had an existing shed that was, again, from 1997, which has seen its better days. Dilapidated, kind of fallen apart. I knocked it down with the intention of building a new shed. Via the home show that was in January, which caused me to buy something that I probably shouldn't have purchased, but yes, I did buy it. I initially wanted to have a concrete pad poured in the area to maximize the area of my location. So I had contracted a contractor who they basically spelled it out. I want to maximize my yard, keep it in a certain location. Everything was taken care of. The measurements were taken care of. Unfortunately, the measurements were incorrect. A concrete pad was poured with the intention that the easement that falls where my yard is, where my neighbor's yard is, falls within 5 feet. The assumption was you cut 2.5 middle to here, and they put 5 feet off. Needless to say, I'm off. The concrete pad was poured. The variant, what I'm asking for is to have the variance for the 2 feet for 2 reasons. Number one, to maximize my yard, and second of all, the location of my pool lines from my pool that was installed. Previously, before that, I did have a leaky line. Lines were then pulled out with the intention that I was going to pour a concrete slab. The contractor suggested that I don't pour concrete over a pool line in the event that this happens again, so it'll be a bigger disaster. At that time, that would be it. Thank you for your consideration.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Storr?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, from my understanding, the pad's poured, it's already on the easement there, and you're coming to us so that way you don't need to tear it down or whatever.
Correct.
Understandable. I get that that could be extremely expensive and not what you want to spend money on. Would you be willing to agree to an addendum, whereas if the town or county ever needs to gain access to that easement, you'd be willing to remove the shed and the concrete pad at a later time?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, you've been there since '95, you understand it's probably not gonna happen.
Yeah, I maintain the easement myself. I do keep it up so to make sure there's nothing, but then again, yeah, I understand.
But in the scope of this board, you would agree to an addendum, whereas if someone needed to gain access to it, you would be willing to remove the shed at your cost?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, no further questions, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. Mr. Sugg?
I have no questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Sugg. Mr. Tillmans?
I have no questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Tillmans. Mr. Drenzo?
Thank you, Madam, thank you, Madam Chair. So if I'm getting this right, you're making sure that it's inconvenient for you to put the shed somewhere else. It was inconvenient for you to have a pad poured somewhere else because of the pool lines.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So then for us as a board, we have to weigh that versus the convenience for the community with the easement there.
Initially, the initial shed that I did have, I did knock down with the intention of, obviously, there's the new codes that did come out. I was aware of that. I laid it up to my contractor who staked out the property, who did measure from the fence rather than taking the measurements from the house off the survey. When it was staked, it was poured. I was not aware of that until several months later when I was applying for the permit. They actually had the structure built. And I was then made aware that I am 2 feet short.
Okay.
Based on that.
Okay. Thank you. Matt, the code changed on this?
Unfortunately, we had to codify to not allow shed structures within a drainage easement because of the design contours that have stormwater capacity in them. It was done in 2020.
Okay. No further questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Drenzo. Mr. Michaely?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We've had petitions such as yours in the past where the town engineer then rendered an opinion. Have you been in touch with the town engineer? Is there did anyone ever bring this up with the town engineer, see if we can get a letter saying this is okay or not okay?
No, since the it's been quite some time since we involved the town engineer with the calculations of the capacity of that easement. Since then, we've devised an easement encroachment agreement, which was alluded to earlier. It gets filed at the county clerk's office. So it's pretty much runs with the land. If there's any access needed to that easement, it's the owner's responsibility to remove the building.
But we've had some within the past year or so where the engineer, there was at least 2 or 3 where the engineer wrote a letter saying it's not impactful. And I know there was at least 1 or 2 where he said it is impactful. Would we be able to, at this point, does he have what he would need to be able to do this if we asked the engineer to do it?
I don't see that being problematic as a part of a condition of the approval.
What would be the other?
Refer to our legal department?
Rather than tabling it, I was making a condition on this.
Okay. How does it work if the engineer, if we were to approve this with probably two conditions. How would it work if the engineer gives a negative letter? You understand, you see where we're going with this?
I understand exactly what your approach is in the event of going ahead gaining access to it.
And not just that, whether or not it's impactful, whether not all drainage easements are the same. So I don't think any of us are really qualified to say whether or not your 2 feet of concrete there makes a difference. An engineer, a town engineer would know that.
The initial structure I did have was further closer to the fence. So I'm actually 5 feet out, further out. than
Yeah,
what
but
you
doesn't mean,
begin.
but code has changed since then. So if you wanted to put that up today, you wouldn't have been able to. So this was codified a few years ago. We don't want to go against something that the town engineer would say you shouldn't do. It's very likely that it'll be fine. But what would happen if we made the town engineer's satisfactory approval a condition and it didn't happen? They just wouldn't get the permit, right? Okay.
Condition wouldn't be met.
Right. You see where we're going with that? What would be necessary? And so I think it would, if it was up to me, I mean, that's what I think may be a good idea, but that's all I have for now.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Michaeling. Okay, I spoke to your wife and she showed me where the concrete is poured. The measurement error was on the part of the contractor.
Yes, ma'am.
Have you notified the contractor of the problem?
I have notified them. I brought out the attention when the measurement was provided from the difference between my fence and his fence, dividing it by 2, which is not the assumption. And I said the error was made on your part for this. It should have been done from the survey from the corner of my house, which was brought out by one of Matt's people that was actually doing the measurements.
I'm sorry, I'm having
one of Matt's adjusters came out and actually took care of everything and measured it and showed me how you measure properly, not from the back to the front, but from the front to the back.
Mm-hmm.
So it was taken care of like that with the assumption, he goes, I've done it before, I did your neighbors down the road. I was like, okay. To me, I was fine.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I left it. And left it alone, let it be until I found out when my builder would be ready, applied for the permit within due time, and was made aware of this.
Okay. And the contractor hasn't offered any relief to you?
If it goes negative, I'll probably be taking it to the next step. But unfortunately, it would delay the project even more with money being put down, and I don't believe I'll get my refund back on the shed. Being that.
Oh, okay. All right, so you understand it's break up that concrete now, or break it up later if there's a need to access the
I
drainage.
understand.
But that would mean moving a shed as well.
I understand.
So
That's fine.
it
I
would
get
be
it.
more, but it's with less of a chance of you're having to do it.
Absolutely, I understand. I'm willing to take that.
Okay, thank you. Anyone in the audience have any questions or concerns? All right, there being none.
I'd like to make a motion.
Yep, go right ahead.
Whereas the zoning board of appeals of the town of Lancaster has made the following findings, that no undesirable change will be produced in the character of the neighborhood by the granting the area variance relief sought, that no detriment to nearby properties will be created by granting the area variance relief sought, that the benefit sought by the applicant cannot be achieved by some other method feasible for the applicant to pursue other than the area variance relief sought, that the requested area variance relief sought is not substantial, that the proposed area variance relief sought will not have an adverse effect or impact on the physical or environmental conditions in the neighborhood or district, that the alleged difficulty is self-created, but not to the extent necessary to preclude the granting of the area variance relief sought, that this board has taken into consideration the benefit to the applicants if the area variance relief sought is granted as weighted against the detriment to the health, safety, and welfare of the neighborhood community by such grant, that within the intent and purposes of this ordinance, the variance relief sought, if granted, is the minimum variance necessary to afford relief, along with 2 additions. The first being that you will file with the county that if access is needed to the easement, that the homeowner and anyone you subsequently sell the home to will remove that concrete pad and structure at the homeowner's cost, and that this is all pending the town engineer saying that there will be no negative or no detriment caused by the 2-foot variance that we are proposing to be granted.
I'll second.
Okay.
Mr. Michaelis?
Michaeling, yes. Okay, may we have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Dorenzo.
No.
Mr. Michaely.
Yes.
Mr. Storr.
Yes.
Mr. Sugg.
Yes.
Mr. Tillman.
Yes.
Ms. Monticelli.
Yes. Okay, you understand the conditions that were added?
Now, the conditions that you're asking for the engineering, and you're also asking for the second policy with the conditions with the county. So with the window of opportunity that I do have leading up to it, how long does that process take in order for me to file it with the county and that?
Is there?
We have a prepared document that we'd be able to provide for you, so that you can have an attorney make that filing. And I'm drafting an email to the town engineer as we speak to review the request and assess the capacity.
Okay, so at this time, so I cannot complete the structure. I cannot have the structure built until those documents and that approval is taken care of.
That's
correct.
That's correct, right? Yeah.
I would definitely wait till the town attorney, or till the town engineer takes a look at it.
Okay. All right, beautiful, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we're going to take a 10-minute break. Resume at 8:25, please.
And I will let everyone remember that live streaming is still live. It's not off, so everything you say and do will be recorded. Okay.
Saying I'm a great guy.
Yes.
How you doing, Sean? Good to see you. Yeah. Keeping him busy down there in Evans. I will. Well, yeah, he's feeling that. What's that? No, Great, there was only one way to get to the Grand Island. In Erie. It's probably about the same distance.
Thing is,
I've got the electronic copies, thank you.
I wish everything would be electronic.
I'm trying really
That's
hard.
what I'm trying.
Oh, I'm pushing it so hard.
Yeah, I got it.
For payment and applications and everything online, it's just a lot easier.
Time to get out of there. Intermission.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's intermission. And the Diane, I don't know, when we were talking, somebody had a medical condition going on.
That's what I was just looking at down there.
Yeah.
What happened?
Somebody was upstairs, the EMTs were there with, or EMS, yeah, EMSs were there. I don't know what, they had him on monitors.
Oh.
They were checking his blood pressure and his,
Help.
But it's pulse ox and everything else, I guess.
That's what it seems like.
So,
What? Yeah, it's cool. No, so this is behind you.
have you said,
Good, how are you doing?
it's like 101 CBA, I found this document. So old. You know what, I mean, you get on the board.
What?
It's sort of like, and you don't. Or you guys, I think
The cord would go that far.
Tony, just listen and follow through. You're a smart guy. But it'd be great if when they got it, they handed something out. Yeah, great. Hey, you were
And where's this from?
That's from a training event, 05.
Oh.
It's basically a PDF document.
Yeah.
And it gives you the basics, the fundamentals. This came from the Night Council. And a lot of these association towns, there are others, like Lakes region, up and so they do these conference ratings, so they're doing the planning board, zoning board, they'll have specific.
75 outside. Right.
That was pending? I went to
Yeah.
state.
Who was following this? So how did you settle?
Just gain a lot of like little nuances and things. And we're able to talk to other communities that have gone through years. So why not, rather than taking over, and then Carlton gets what he wants. Yeah. Every community that's available for a webinar, I'm on it. I just log in.
Are they all live webinars or can you rewatch it
It's
afterwards?
live, and then they'll send PowerPoint words. So I mean, there's some pretty good ones that I got. Yeah, but if Tony needs some, you know, some reading.
First meeting, he was like,
Yeah, he's good.
figured it out.
Hey, I'm just finishing up my break. Are you okay? Everything all right? All right, how far are you? What time do you leave? 40? So you should be on the other side of Syracuse by now.
First,
All right, well, don't get too crazy because the cops are, you know, they'll bang you.
yeah.
Don't, with a ticket, don't go over 75. Don't go over 75. You're an idiot. That's the fastest way to get a ticket. Okay, well, don't say I didn't warn you. Zoning.
There is increased business.
Yeah, I don't know how much. I gotta send a message to Mike and find out what we're able to bring. All right, I'll well, just text me when you get there.
Yeah, no, I'm good.
I don't care. All right, see ya.
Who's next? Which one?
There. Some kids, you know?
Who's next?
The kids are something else. He's 22 years old, right? He's like, I won't get into 11:30. I go, so text me anyway.
Of course. Of course.
Well, you're gonna be asleep. Just text me. Otherwise, I won't be able to sleep.
Yeah.
What's that?
No, one of them is, they sent me some, I started their email address. And then I sent a call to M&T. Oh, it's over there. It's quick. You really,
Oh, he passed this on.
Yeah.
Oh. Let me do so.
Actually, it's true to address some of the concerns. Well, they're wanting to get us so it's planning back in one day.
Somebody died already.
No,
Oh, see if there's some people who help them out. I'll go. So I find doing. But that, he's going to wait forever for the sound.
Yeah.
I know, every day, right? To be a good neighbor. I'm sure. You gave point everybody. You have to close the doors. There's got to be some, maybe there's something in between now, those two things, right?
Yeah, I think
You can ask. Okay, we're resuming the August Lancaster Zoning Board of Appeals meeting after a short break. And we have our petitioner ready to go.
I do.
Good evening. Do you need to, you don't need to read the notice again?
So, yeah, what I was talking to Diane is, given that we've been here 3 times previously, the variances remain the same, so I think we would be okay with waiving the laborious reading of the variances again.
Okay.
So I'm going to start. Sean Hopkins of the law firm of Hopkins, George and McCarthy on behalf of the applicant. Also with me are some familiar faces. Tim Boyle on behalf of the applicant. Behind me, Anthony Pandolfi, project engineer from Carmina Wood Design. And then last but certainly not least, Amy Dake from SRF Associates, the traffic engineering firm in Rochester, is here as well. As the board will recall, we've presented this to you 3 previous times, I believe going back to your meeting on January 13th, April 14th, and then finally a month ago on July 14th. And I know it was not a full board. There was a couple of you who are not here. So I'm going to bring us up to date with where we're at. I'm going to let Amy talk briefly about traffic because she's probably the foremost expert in Western New York, if not all New York State, in terms of traffic engineering. And then we're going to go through some additional information we have. Before I do that, I do want to note during the break I gave each person a handout. I believe all this information has either been handed out before or emailed to you, but I will go over what it is. Number 1, it's a copy of the zoning code, light commercial and general commercial. And the sole purpose of that is to provide you with another list of the uses that are permitted in the zoning district. The second one is a parcel report printed from the Erie County website. And the whole purpose of this is, as you recall, there were previous discussions about purchasing the adjacent parcel to the east, the back of Walden on Remwood. And while we were interested in that, Tim has actually discussed that with the current owner for about a decade now. Upon some review, we learned that that vacant property, unfortunately for everyone, is a federal wetland. So it's really not viable in terms of development.
Sorry, Sean, it's a what?
A federal wetland.
Oh.
So it's really not viable for development. The third is a copy of the negative declaration issued by the town board pursuant to the State Environmental Quality Review Act on June 6th of this year by unanimous vote. The fourth is the color rendering, which we presented again and again, of the building, prepared by David Sutton of Sutton Architecture. The sole purpose of that is, I think we've made a clear and convincing argument that the building is going to be a dramatic improvement in terms of the appearance and aesthetics compared to the existing vacant former gas station. The next handout is 11 by 17, which we did hand out last time. And basically, this is a plan that Anthony Pandolfi prepared to depict, well, what could you do alternatively? Meaning, is there any project that would be feasible here that would not require any relief whatsoever from this board? And we think this pretty conclusively proves that the answer to that is no. And keep in mind, one of the variances is for the fact that the parcel is 0.94 acres in size, and the minimum parcel size is 1 acre. What? And on a corner lot. The next is a full-size copy of the striping plan that we submitted. And basically, this is based on a comment, I believe it was from you, Keith, last time. The question that was asked was, well, we're doing this extending of the turn lane by approximately 192 feet. And you asked a very good question that you didn't conclusively have the answer to, which was, when you do that, are you sure it can be done within the right-of-way? Because if it couldn't be, it may impact some of the variances. So we went back to the drawing board. Believe it or not, we actually got surveying work done of the roadway itself. And thankfully, we confirmed all of that work can be done within the confines of the right-of-way. So it'll all be done in the right-of-way. We've provided a copy of that plan to Gina Wilkolaski, traffic engineer at the Erie County Department of Public Works. She has said it's fine, and then ultimately we will need a highway work permit from the county. And then finally, last but not least, is a report I emailed to you earlier today, prepared by Don Griebner, certified real estate appraiser. He planned on being here this evening, but unfortunately he has COVID. And basically the sole purpose of this report was to demonstrate very conclusively that the proposed redevelopment of the site as a standalone, keep in mind the key word is standalone, car wash facility will not have any negative impacts on the two contiguous properties, or the three contiguous properties. The existing accounting office located at 3630 Walden, and the contiguous property also owned by the same owner, 21 Remwood, which I indicated is a federal wetland. And then the property owned by Matthew Russo on the opposite side of the Remwood Avenue right-of-way at 377 Central Avenue. We'll talk about that in a second. So that's all the new information that we've provided. I don't think I need to go back and revisit history in terms of everything that we've done over the past 7 months, but I do want to touch on a couple of things. As you know, we've had extensive discussions with nearby property owners going all the way back to January, including an on-site meeting at the existing Class C chassis car wash at 6164 Main Street at the intersection of Youngs Road and Main Street, and the ZBA chairperson was kind enough to attend that meeting on a cold winter day. But I do want to highlight the changes that we've made once again based on the input we've received. Number one, we've agreed to provide 54-foot long acoustic block sound panel along a portion of the east property line. It's important to note that then is backed up by a 6-foot solid fence. So if you look at the specifics that we provided, the technical details of that wall, it will actually reduce the decibel levels at that along this area by 20 decibels, which is a very substantial reduction. Number two, unlike the existing Class C chassis car wash at 6164 Main Street, when you pull into that tunnel there, you notice there's typically teenagers or younger adults spraying the vehicles. Because of advances in technology, that no longer exists. So the pre-wash area begins 50 feet inside the building. When we visited that Class C chassis, that did generate some noise, kids spraying water. That was not part of this location. Number three, based on input we received from Matt and Marie Russo, the owners of the two-family home at 377 Central Avenue, on the opposite side of the Remwood Avenue right-of-way, which is 50 feet. We've added an 8-foot fence here. Also, based on their most recent input in early July, as you recall, originally they asked us to install a row of approximately 10 evergreen trees along the southern border of their property. Based on some further discussions that myself and Mr. Boyle had with them, they then expressed a preference that we actually plant the trees on our site, on our side of the fence. And I actually think from a screening and noise perspective, that is beneficial. Based on the plan we originally presented to you on January 13th of this year, which of course requires what we believe are minor setback variances for vehicle use area along both Central Avenue In Walden Avenue, we've added very extensive landscaping. That is extra landscaping. I believe in total we're showing approximately 80 bushes and 24 trees to really try and pretty up that corner, especially when you consider what's there today. Obviously, a vacant gas station, absolutely no landscaping, no screening to speak of, nothing in compliance in terms of lighting, stormwater management, et cetera, et cetera. One of the points I tried to make effectively during the previous presentations, but I'm not sure I've been able to do so, is the fact that there have been concerns expressed from time to time, not only by some of the members of this board, but by the public relative to traffic impacts. I want to note a couple of things. Number one, that particular issue has been studied exhaustively. The review of that particular topic concluded with the town board's issuance of a negative declaration on June 6th, and that was consistent with the planning board's recommendation during its meeting in early May. However, as members of the community who are asked questions by residents and others, we thought it was really important to bring Amy Dake into town this evening, give a little overview of how she went about the traffic analysis and ultimately what her professional conclusion is. And because she's not been here before, if you have any questions about that aspect of the project, please feel free to ask them, and Amy will address them as part of her presentation. So with that being said, Amy?
Pardon me, can I ask a question, a question of you prior to this meeting? I'd like to note that Mr. Castellana is not here today.
Yes.
To avoid what happened last month, would you like to wait till we have a full board, or are we prepared to continue moving on forward now?
We are ready to continue to move on, but I'd like to see where we're at the end, of course.
Okay.
Yeah, and I understand it's summertime. It's not easy to sit a full 7-member board. But thank you for reminding me. So with that being said, Amy?
Sean, can I continue on with that? You'd like to see where we're at. What does that mean? I'm not really sure I know what that means.
Meaning we're hoping we have 4 votes to approve it. If we don't, and there's a need for more information, then I guess we'll consider whether or not we want to ask for a tabling. Ultimately, that's up to you, this board, of course.
So, okay, so we're supposed to say what we're going to vote first and then decide if we're going to.
Well, no, it's ultimately up to this board. What I'm saying is if it's clear as day that you think we need some more information or you have questions that remain unanswered, rather than there be a vote, we'd ask for the opportunity to provide that additional information. We have worked really hard on this.
Understandable.
And that's all I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, I think that Mr. Storm brings up a great point, is that during the last meeting, we thought that we had all the information that we needed.
Right.
And we're prepared to vote, and we started to vote, and then you have every right to, and you said that you'd like to table this until we have a full board. Well, here we are today, and we still don't have a full board.
Right.
So the question is, that I think Keith asked, and I'm trying to get a handle on, is are we able to vote tonight without a full board?
Well, of course, you're always able to vote, but I guess, again, I'd like to see if you think we've answered the questions you previously had.
Fair enough.
So with that being said, I am going to turn over to Amy briefly. But I understand the question, and thank you for pointing out that there actually wasn't 7 members.
Good evening. My name is Amy Dake. I'm the Senior Managing Traffic Engineer with SRF Associates.
Excuse me, can I just have you just spell your last name?
It's D-A-K-E.
Thank you.
Our address is 3495 Winton Place, Rochester, New York, 14623. Okay. We did prepare a comprehensive traffic impact study for this development. We looked at the weekday PM peak hours, and we looked at the Saturday midday peak hours, which are the prime time for car wash customers. In particular, with this project, the original project had multiple driveways on both roadways, Central and Walden. So we looked at gap studies to determine which driveway was most appropriate and wanted to provide the safest access to the site. Ultimately, what you see before you is the current site plan with access solely on Central Avenue, which has now been approved by both New York State DOT and Erie County DPW, along with mitigation being the extension of the left turn lane to provide access for that southbound traffic. A few things that I'd like to point out that are important considerations as far as traffic goes for a car wash is that the car wash itself, the amount of traffic that it can generate or actually push through its driveways is ultimately limited by how fast a car can go through the tunnel of the car wash. Most car washes operate at a 1 to 2 minute rate for cars. So even at 1 minute per vehicle, we're talking about 60 vehicles maximum in an hour to go through the actual car wash tunnel. The trip generation that was included in the traffic study was based on actual car wash data from other similar facilities. We've studied many, many car washes like this, as well as Delta Sonic car washes, which I'm sure you're very familiar with. This type of a car wash averages mostly an hourly average trip rate of about 17 vehicles per hour. The busiest time of the day is typically from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., so we're not talking about significant traffic during a morning commuter peak or an evening commuter peak. And a daily average is on the order of 210 to 265 vehicles per day. By comparison, a Delta Sonic car wash generates somewhere in the neighborhood of 3,800 cars per day. So it's significantly more because Delta Sonic has other uses on the site besides just a car wash tunnel. This model and most of the car washes that you see today are going to a subscription-based service. So it's not what it used to be where you pull in, you hope the line isn't too long, you pay your fee, and you go through the car wash. Now people are subscribing to their car wash facilities near their homes or their place of employment for somewhere on the order of $15 to $25 per month, and they get unlimited car washes. So they can go there anytime they want as long as the car wash is open. And if they drive by, see that the line's too long, they keep going and they come back at another time. And the other point with that is that these car washes, you're seeing them pop up in a lot of locations because they thrive on pass-by traffic. And what that means is that you have a lot of traffic already on Walden Ave and Central, and people that are driving on those roadways going to work, to home, to the grocery store, to take their kids to school, they will stop at the car wash when it's convenient for them and when they're passing by to get their car washed. They're not going to go out of their way to drive to the car wash as a destination. That's not your only trip of the day. I mean, very few people will leave their home, go to the car wash, turn around and go back home. The only other thing I wanted to point out with this is that the existing site does have several driveways that are very close to the intersection of Walden and Central, and this plan closes those driveways and moves the proposed driveway as far away from the intersection as possible, which is very positive in terms of safety for both the intersection and the site. So with that, if you have any traffic questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you. Anyone on the board have questions?
No, if I could ask a question. Sean, can you show again, I don't have it here, the drawing that shows what could be built there?
Yeah, I actually did get it out. It's at 11 by 7. Yeah, it's in there.
You have it? Oh, it's in part of our new package?
Yeah, it's in the new package.
Okay.
I can afford this.
So when I saw that first a few months ago, thank you. So when I saw that a few months ago, with all the setbacks, this is what could be built here without a variance.
Right.
My first thought was fast food would be a proper use here because you need a driving lane for drive-through. You can only put a smaller building here, and most fast food restaurants are smaller, or 2,000 or 3,000 square feet. So could you tell us what would be, and in my mind, and I could be wrong, I think that your average fast food, whether it's let's not even say Tim Hortons, because we know Tim Hortons would be more traffic than
Right.
$2.50 a day. But whether it's McDonald's, Burger King, Arby's, generally speaking, would you be able to say what the impact would be car-wise per day?
Yeah, absolutely. So this site, as you noted, is small. So I went and looked at some of these because I was thinking the same thing myself. If we put a 2,000 square foot building on, which is a little smaller than your typical fast food, most fast foods are 2,500, 3,000 square feet. If we did a 2,000 square foot fast food restaurant, in the evening peak, we're looking at 46 entering trips and 44 exiting trips. The car wash that was studied in the traffic study is 29 and 28. So, and that's not including the discount that we would take for the pass-by trips that I mentioned. So this is what's actually going in and out of the driveways.
What does that mean? What's the difference between entering and exiting?
So if you have a car wash, generally, and you'll see the numbers are almost the same, 29 entering, 29 exiting. So the car enters the driveway, goes through the car wash, and exit within that same hour, 1 hour period of the peak hour, right?
Someone stops and vacuums their car. Right.
Yeah.
Okay, per hour, got it.
Yeah.
For the day, the numbers will always be the same.
Right, but versus a fast food restaurant, which you'll see there's a little bit more of a difference, 46 versus 44. Sometimes you'll have people that park and go in and sit and eat.
Sure. Okay.
And I would note for the record, Amy's not going to say this, but any fast food that you can think of, she's looked at, whether it's McDonald's, Burger King, Chick-fil-A, Mighty Taco, I mean, Starbucks, she's looked at them all, Tim Hortons.
So is it possible to even say this, to say what an average Burger King or McDonald's would be?
Yeah, I mean, that's an average
Okay.
Burger King and McDonald's. So this is based on national data, and so what we have is we have a database of national data for typical fast food restaurants, and that would be your McDonald's, your Wendy's, your Burger King, Taco Bell. I wouldn't include Chick-fil-A in that. They're a different animal.
Sure. So when you say that 46 or 48 number, that's just for the hour, the rush hour? at night?
Yeah, so during the PM peak, sometime between 4 and 6, in this case, it's probably 4:30 to 5:30 or 5 to 6, you'll get 46 people that would enter a fast food restaurant, get their food, go through the drive-through, whatever, and then exit.
What about per day?
Per day, I don't have the numbers for a fast food restaurant per day. Approximately, it's probably on the order of 2,000 cars a day.
Can I interrupt for a second? I'm sorry if I'm stepping on your toes here. I don't think anybody's really, correct me if I'm wrong, concerned with the cars while they're in the line. It's moving out of the lot is the huge issue. My question that you brought up that I asked last week is you have this on the existing drawing that you're gonna relocate the existing curb to widen the lane.
Right.
Does that require any issue with the town? Because if it was approved with the town board and the planning board, this is a proposed striping plan, including moving a curb. Does that change anything? Nothing?
It's a county highway, so ultimately the county has to review those plans and issue a permit to do that work.
Okay. And then second, a lot of times when a business is on a corner, especially on a busy intersection such as this, they would have a right turn exit only. Something that would, even in your thought process of something that would reduce the danger of making a left-hand turn out of that onto Central Avenue. Because if you only turn right onto Transit, then people go down Pleasant to get transit that way, or go down, turn right on one of the side streets and go whatever. But it's that left-hand turn out of that business that I think, am I wrong, that I think everyone's concerned about?
Yeah, because I think you've got a lane, you've got 2 lanes going northbound that merge into one right there. And we know that yellow light means hit the gas, not hit the brakes. So that's what people do. So they fly through that intersection and they try to merge over.
I've called the police department. There's been, I think, 88 car accidents just in that strip of within 180 feet of that intersection on Central over the last 5 years.
Okay. Keith, I'm going to stop you right there. Can you just hold that thought because we're kind of getting scattered here? Sean, does anyone else have anything to say to the board? Any
Well, the only other thing I wanted to walk through after was just obviously the variances again very quickly.
Okay.
But I thought because there has been traffic questions, and while I don't think it's necessarily relevant for the variances, I thought it was important to bring Amy. She's the one who's the expert.
Yeah, and originally, she asked if we had questions, but I think at this point, it's better to finish the presentation, and I think we'll go around the board a couple of times because this is very complex, and one answer generates more questions.
Okay, so then what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through 2 additional things. Very, very briefly, I want to talk about that report that was prepared by Mr. Grubner. So there were previously some comments raised, particularly by at least one property owner, that this project would have a negative impact on property values. Then you may ask, well, how is that relevant with respect to area variances? Unlike a use variance, we have to demonstrate inability to realize a reasonable rate of return. The reason why it's relevant is one of the variance criteria, and actually two of the area variance criteria. Area variance criteria number one is whether the granting of the requested relief will result in an undesirable change in the character of the neighborhood or a detriment to nearby property owners. And area variance criteria number three is whether the requested relief is substantial. And the case law again and again says, well, in determining whether something is substantial, the key word is harm. Will any harm result? So Mr. Griebner took a close analysis at 22 car washes in Western New York and basically reached a professional opinion that no, the redevelopment of this site as a standalone car wash facility will not have any adverse impacts on property values. It is important to note that when conducting that analysis, he did look at the amenity package that we're proposing. The fencing, the acoustablock sound paneling, the replacement of the windows at the adjacent office building, the landscaping along the property lines, et cetera, et cetera. And I just want to point out a couple of pages in this report because I think they're particularly important. If you turn to page 19 of the report, you'll see it's a color photograph. So that particular photograph is of the existing Class C chassis at 6164 Main Street, which is, of course, the northeast intersection of Main and Young's, and some or all of you have been to that particular location. As you know, on March 21st, we submitted letters from 3 of the property owners that basically stated unequivocally, we addressed their concerns. They had traffic concerns. Now we've addressed any concerns they had relative to lighting, screening, landscaping, noise. And in a couple of instances, that has required for him to go back out, meet with neighbors, make some adjustments in terms of fencing and landscaping. But I think that particular example is important because that actually borders numerous residential properties. And then if you look at aerial photograph number 20, so this is an existing car wash located, actually 20, I'm sorry, I turned to 19. It's a car wash located in the town of Lockport at 6719 South Transit. And this particular car wash is also adjacent to residential properties on Bart's Road. Unfortunately, Mr. Griebner was able to find a couple of recent real estate transactions. So you can see that tiny ranch house directly behind it with a red roof. That sold on June 11th of 2021 for $1.35 per square foot. And then the house located 2 houses down, meaning 2 houses further away, sold only 4 months later on October 20th of 2021 for $1.31 a square foot, which is, approximately equal, which supports Mr. Griebner's position that mere proximity to a standalone car wash that's done right and done correctly does not have a negative impact on property values. And keep in mind, his analysis is a little bit different because in this instance, the property that's closest is actually already zoned commercial. It can be used for commercial purposes. The property that's closest and used for residential purposes is the Russo's property located on the opposite side of Remwood Avenue. So I want to talk about that. I think we've talked about the striping plan. I do want to mention, Mr. Storr, that Erie County did ask us to consider changing the curb line just a touch, but I want to note it's minor. I don't think if you drove by there 100 times you'll ever notice it. It's moving the curb by about approximately a foot for a very short stretch. And that will require a permit from the Erie County Department of Public Works. And in fact, the reason they want that is to ensure that the turn lane is 12 feet wide. We originally were showing it at 11 feet wide, and that would ultimately work, but they said if you want to do it right, make it 12 feet wide. So we've done that. I think Amy would take the position in terms of traffic impacts that in light of the fact that this is a relatively low generator of trips compared to the wide assortment of other uses allowed in that GC zoning, and also in light of the fact that we are actually undertaking, putting in the striping, making the improvements in terms of traffic mitigation, I think your opinion is quite clear. This project will not result in potentially significant adverse traffic impacts. With that being said, as Mr. Storr indicated, he's done homework. We're not saying that intersection is ideal. What we're saying is, if you look at the wide assortment of uses that are out there, including fast food restaurants, including actually just releasing that existing building with 4 curb cuts, we truly believe this is better. Then I want to also just walk you through very, very briefly the variances again. So we can go over them and make sure they have any questions. So area variance number 1, lot size. The minimum lot size in this zoning district is 1 acre, and obviously we're at 0.94 acres. That variance would be required for any redevelopment of the site, and I think that's important. The only way we could eliminate that variance was 2 ways. By purchasing the portion of the Redwood Avenue right-of-way from the town of Lancaster. He spent about 2 years trying to see if that would ultimately work, and lo and behold, it wouldn't, because it's the only access to these wide assortment of vacant parcels behind. So the town was not particularly interested in that. Number 2, purchasing either a portion of the existing office building at 3630 or the back area at 21 Remwood. As I indicated, we did a lot of homework on that, and ultimately, while there was some disagreement in terms of purchase price, and the purchase price has changed in numerous instances over the past 10 years, which is fine, the back area, which potentially otherwise could have been redeveloped if it was rezoned, is a federal wetland. So it's really off being a feasible alternative for that variance.
Sean, if I could interrupt you right there. I'm not a federal wetlands expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I can tell you that there is a way, it's a laborious process to go through, but you can build on federal wetlands.
Right, so basically, Anthony and I are very familiar with federal wetlands, unfortunately. We deal with them every day. You certainly have the right to seek a permit for anything over 1/10 of an acre, which 1/10 of an acre is very small, would require mitigation and an effort at avoidance, and we would have to demonstrate that that's absolutely essential for our project, and we don't think it is. So could we ask for a permit? Absolutely we could, and we'd also have to deal with the fact it's not zoned. So we just don't think is really a realistic option. Area variance number 2 pertains to the building setback from the property at 21 Remwood. Keep in mind it's vacant and it's zoned residential. The zoning code would require 50 feet and the building is 10 feet. Area variance number 3 is basically the exact same variance, but pertains to the fact that the office building owned by the same family is zoned commercial. And there we're of course also showing 10 feet versus 25 feet. Area variance number 3 is for vehicle use, or no, that's area variance number 3. Area variance number 4 is for the vehicle use area setback from Central Avenue. We're at 10.5 feet. The zoning code would require 20 feet. Area variance number 5 is for the vehicle use area setback along Walden. The zoning code again requires 20 feet, and we're at 10 feet. I would note for both area variances number 4 and 5, based on the input we received from this board in January, that's why we went back to the drawing board and added all that extra landscaping. Area variance number 6 is literally only for this very, very small portion of the driveway as it comes out of the car wash. Again, because this is residential, the zoning code would require a 25-foot setback, and what we're showing is 13.5 feet. I do want to highlight the fact that 2 of the variances pertain to the back area, that area at 21 Remwood, which again is a federal wetland and is vacant land. So it's kind of tough to argue that those are going to result in any detrimental impacts. So those are the variances. They seem like a lot, but if you look at the specifics of them and you focus on whether or not any harm will result, I think there's ample justification. Again and again, we've talked about the balancing test and the 5 criteria, which of course requires you to balance the benefits that will be received by the applicant if the requested relief is granted and weigh those against any resulting detriments to the health, safety, and welfare of the surrounding community. Obviously, we've documented in great detail the benefits. In the absence of the requested relief, we simply cannot redevelop this parcel. Tim will be left with the choice that we presented before, and it's absolutely not meant to be a threat. We'll just simply have to release the existing building. There's no doubt that the lease rate we'll get for the existing building is lower than what we get for the new car wash. We're also stuck with the layout in terms of access. We're doing exactly what the New York State Department of Transportation and the Erie County Department of Public Works have insisted. Tim and I spent a lot of time trying to preserve at least some type of access, even if it was only one direction onto Walden Avenue. We probably spent 10 months on that. Ultimately, that was not successful. So we're left with one curb cut on Central Avenue as far away from the busy intersection of Walden and Central as we can have it. Area variance criteria number 1, whether there'll be an undesirable change in the character of the neighborhood or a detriment to nearby properties. I think the answer to that is clearly no. I think we provided ample documentation. I would note that Tim and I have had the opportunity to sit down with Matt and Marie Russo, the adjoining properties on Central Avenue. They have been very gracious. We've kept them in the loop. And ultimately, we are showing the landscaping that they requested. We've also made a very clear representation to them. We're aware of the town's noise ordinance. If any activity in connection with this redevelopment project results in a 5 decibel increase compared to the existing ambient noise levels on that site, we will have to implement additional mitigation measures. We're fine stating that in the record. We don't think that will occur, but if it does, we will be left trying to solve that problem, which we will do. Alternative area variance criteria number 2, whether there are any alternatives to the requested relief that will allow us to receive the benefits we're seeking. And the answer to that is no. We've explored purchasing additional property. It's simply not feasible. We think we've come up with a layout that reflects input from a wide assortment of governmental agencies. Area variance criteria number 3 is whether the requested relief is substantial. And again, I would ask you to look at the layout and look at whether or not the granting of the area variances, not the project itself, will result in any harm. And I think the answer to that is no. Area variance criteria number 4, whether the granting the requested relief will result in adverse physical or environmental impacts. As I indicated, the town board did conduct a coordinated environmental review. It was an exhaustive review that resulted in its issuance of a negative declaration by unanimous vote on June 6th of this year. They looked at traffic, drainage, lighting, community character, etc., etc. And their area variance number 5, whether or not the alleged hardship is self-created, which of course this board knows does not preclude the granting of the requested relief. In this instance, I think we can make a pretty clear argument that it's not self-created. The reason for that is this parcel was actually rezoned as part of the town-wide rezoning. The NOCO entity already owned the property prior to that zoning code, and under the old zoning code, some of the variances that we're seeking would not be needed. Nonetheless, if you disagree with that particular criteria, I don't think that precludes granting the requested relief. And then criteria number 6, which is not one of the 5 statutory criteria, but I hear you recite it again and again, is it the minimum relief that allows us to receive the benefits we're seeking? And the answer is yes. We've incorporated input, and we think what we're showing represents a good faith effort to incorporate input from a wide range of stakeholders. So with that being said, we'll circle back if there's any questions that any members of the board have. We do appreciate you provided us numerous opportunities to present this project, to go back to the drawing board, incorporate input, but we respectfully request that we've provided very strong justification for the granting of the requested area variances. We would ask that you grant them so we can proceed to the next step, which is seeking a special use permit and site plan approval, which will require Anthony and his team at Carmina Wood Design to begin fully engineered plans. So thank you again, and please ask us any questions you may have.
Thank you, Sean.
You're welcome.
Okay. John, you had some questions to begin with, so let's start.
We're starting the question period now?
We're officially starting the questioning by the board members, and I will call on Mr. Michaeli.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just give a few thoughts quickly without further comment. Number 1, this is an awkward site. It is by the shape of the site, by the size of it. One thing I think is worth mentioning is that this has been a gas station for I don't know how many years. When it was a gas station, the site was about half the size of what we're looking at right now. I don't know that there was ever traffic concerns. I mean, maybe I don't pass there often enough. I don't know if that gas station caused traffic concerns, number 1, on half the site. 2, my concern was always about variance number, is it 3, was the noise. Whatever noise that causes to the neighbor. That was my concern from day 1. I don't have necessarily the same traffic concerns that some of my fellow board members have. I respect their opinions on it. My concern always was the noise. I think there have been mitigation efforts here that hopefully would be meaningful. Number three, as far as traffic goes, what I was trying to get at before was, my thought is, if this doesn't happen, whatever happens in the future on this site, because it's a nice size site, it's a little small, but it's a nice size site, it's going to be something different that very well may have more than 250 cars a day. If traffic is an issue, it's going to happen if something else does go here. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Michaeli. Mr. Stork,
Thank you,
feel
ma'am.
free to pick up where you left off.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What I was going at before, would you consider making that a right turn only exit?
Yeah, I'm going to let Amy come back
Yeah.
and address that.
Yeah, if I could address that. So we only have the opportunity to build one driveway here.
Yep.
State DOT has already said no to a driveway on Walden Ave. If we did a right turn only driveway and did not allow left turns to exit, anybody that wanted to go south on Central or east or west on Walden would have to make a right turn and then turn around in a driveway, something. It's very undesirable and very unsafe. More unsafe than allowing the left turn. The other thing is, what we did in the traffic study was we looked at a gap study. And what that means is that the signal, every time it turns red, it creates gaps in the traffic that's northbound on Central Avenue and allows time for left turn traffic to turn out of the site driveway. Now, we measured 51 gaps for left turn traffic in the PM peak and 211 gaps in the Saturday peak hour. So this is the busiest hour during the commuter PM peak and the busiest hour during the Saturday midday peak. What we're talking about in terms of the number of trips that want to make a left turn out of that driveway is 19 in the PM peak. So that's 19 versus 51 available gaps for those people to turn out. So there's 2.5 times the number of gaps available for that traffic. On Saturday, we're looking at 44 left turns turning out of that driveway versus 211 gaps. So it's almost 5 times the number of gaps available. So I don't see a big safety concern, especially with the extension of the left turn lane.
Okay, thank you. No further questions at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Stork. Mr. Sugg?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no questions.
Thank you, Mr. Sugg. Mr. Tillmans?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think, Keith's question was really similar to mine, as far as that traffic goes, because we all know that everyone flies through intersections when they see like yellow lights, and they don't really abide by that. So that would be my only concern, is that you've got people hitting the gas as they're going through that intersection and hitting that driveway, and you've got 2 lanes that are merging. So I can see that being an issue.
Yeah, and our only response there is...
I mean, I know you can't mitigate every single
Right.
safety concern.
Right.
It's just not going to happen.
Right. And again, I do think it comes down to, this site is going to be either redeveloped or released the way it is, and I truly think from a traffic perspective, this is probably the best of the available alternatives.
Anything else, Mr. Tillmans?
Other than that, I guess one of the other questions I have is, I know you did a study as far as value of the property. At the end of the day, though, if you were in the market for an office building, would you move into an office building next to a car wash?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if it had the sound paneling and I had a party like Mr. Boyle's company next door assuring me that if I have concerns, I would address them, and I literally had someone who's going to pay for new windows, yeah, I would.
And keep in mind, the office building is there, and the user that is currently there bought it while it was 10 feet away from an existing gas station with 3 condensing units and 2 air conditioning units 10 feet away from the window. So it's not a big difference.
Well, I think it's an improvement.
I do too, but yep.
And again, we've acknowledged again, we've said this again on the record, if they have concerns after we build this, we're going to work with them to address them, just like we have on every project we've ever worked on.
And I know Sean and John, I just wanted to respond to your last comment. And I know Sean provided a lot of information on the research that we did with Tim Hortons having 1,057 average transactions a day, the NOCO station having 1,128 a day, Jim's Steakout having 350 a day, and another large local fast food operator having 400 a day. All that information comes from the owners of those companies. Those are I reached out to the people who have reached out to us on that corner before.
Sure.
So just for perspective to answer that question.
Thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Timmons?
No, I'm all set, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Duranzo?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Duranzo. Sean, I saw somewhere, and we've got piles and piles of paperwork, so I couldn't tell you where, but...
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Was it the Lancaster Town Board that mentioned there could be a right-hand turn from the property onto Walden Avenue? Because I thought that was going to be closed off altogether.
No, that's been totally precluded by the New York State Department of Transportation.
Okay, all right, so maybe
It was discussed at one point on a previous design.
The plan we originally presented to the planning board, and I believe this was in May of 2021, we're going that far back, actually did show a right-out only driveway also on Walden.
Okay, I did see that somewhere, and it was
did.
confusing.
We were never proposing full access on Walden.
Right, okay, all right, and that was the DOT's decision.
Yeah, DOT absolutely said we are not
So-
allowing access.
Anything that goes in there is going to be limited to just the Central Avenue exit and entrance thing.
That would be my guess based on what we've gone
Amy's
through.
saying yes, so.
Yes, you're right.
There's just not enough property frontage on Walden
Mm-hmm,
to get far enough away from the traffic signal in the driveway.
gotcha.
And keep in mind, there's two, I mean, we're going to actually improve the situation by removing those two driveways.
And by extending the turning lane, by mitigating that existing condition where people queue up into that left turning lane.
Compared to where the White House, the duplex is now, where is that driveway compared to where their driveway currently is?
Where's our driveway? I'm sorry.
There's a White House on 371.
Right.
It's gonna be right where that driveway is? Okay.
Oh, yes, I know where you, yeah, on the other side of the road. I know what you're saying.
Yep.
Yes.
No. You're answering it, I think you're.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to shut up then.
I would tell you it's going to be slightly south by maybe 10 feet of where the existing.
Oh, the driveway for the three.
That driveway actually is like half into the roundabout.
Yeah, you're asking
We
that,
obviously can't do that, so we're just.
So we're bringing it about 10 feet south to be completely on our,
And this is
the way the driveway is right
It's the
now.
paper street, yeah.
Technically encroaches on that paper street, which is Redwood,
Yeah.
which is where all the brush is.
Yeah, where that doesn't exist.
Yeah, exactly. Right now, our driveway is about 10 feet onto that, so we would be moving, the new driveway would be located about 10
Right.
feet south of where the existing driveway is. The key is to get it the furthest point away from the intersection.
Yeah.
To mitigate the
Yeah.
conflicts.
and Tim, again, we wanted to actually move it onto the Remwood right away, and it just didn't work. We were trying to get it even further.
Okay, I have to say that in my 8.5 years on the board, not only have I never spent this much time on a case, I don't think in an entire year of other cases I spent this much time. It's a very, very difficult matter to adjudicate, in my opinion. And when I saw your original petition with the 7 variance requests, I thought, you gotta be kidding me, 7? You know, what in the world could this be? And then I read through them, and okay, now I understand. And then you came in the first time and told us you didn't need one of them, so that was 6. My original concern was abated. But my next concern, and this is a concern for everybody who lives in Lancaster, I believe, myself included, and that is traffic, because we just can't keep up with the new construction. I used to commute from my home on Lake Avenue to downtown Buffalo, and the traffic on William Street between Lake and Union Road, where it turns into Lawson Transit and then onto Union, was absolutely ridiculous. And fortunately, I don't have to make that commute anymore, but just coming home from the store, you know, sometimes William Street is backed up between Aurora and Panora, and sometimes all the way to Transit. So I am very, very sensitive to the concerns of traffic. That being said, this is not a new project. It is not a new development. It is an existing eyesore that's something, and this point has been made before tonight, but at the risk of repeating it, something's going in there. And we have had some letters from the community that are very concerned about this. I'm just going to go over them very briefly because it's getting late. One is from Kathy Baltz, 3638 Walden Avenue, next door to the tax business.
She's
She's against the car wash being put on the corner for the following reasons. We do not want to attract more traffic to this area. We have enough. I do not want to sit in my backyard and listen to the loud noises from the car wash. Car washes belong in an industrial environment. You have to ask yourself one question. Would you want a car wash moving next door to your home? I think I have lived here 35 years. I think I have a say in this matter. Thank you for listening to me. And, you know, my response would be kind of similar, piggybacking on what Sean said. In this particular case, yeah, with all the mitigation efforts that have been agreed to minimize the noise, something's going in there. If I lived in that neighborhood, I would want to make sure it was something where the owners were going to be sensitive to the neighbors' concerns. Secondly, she is living in a residential commercial area, so you know, they're not going to build a house on that site. It's going to be a business.
And if you'll recall, Kathy was actually here at last month's meeting, and her other point she made, she put in the letter, was she was unequivocally against us considering adding additional property, because then that would obviously push commercial zoning next to her house. And she was a very nice woman, and if we have the opportunity, we'll sit down with her and try to address any specific concerns she had. I was hoping she might be here tonight.
In particular, her concern about the noise, because I think we've proven through our decibel measurements that the background noise of that car wash is lower than the background noise of Walden Avenue. Keeping in mind, there's currently 20+ thousand cars a day that go by the end of her driveway. That's as the accountant has told us, he's never opened his windows in the entire time he's practiced there, and it's been decades because of that noise.
Because of the noise. We also received a letter from Stephen Socha, 177 Morano Drive in Depew, and I'm just going to read a portion of it because it's over a page long and it's typewritten. But I think this is the pertinent part of his concern. Traffic, including flow, stacking, and current congestion, pedestrian safety, and noise are all legitimate broad brush concerns that encompass many other more personal hardships. For example, students walking from school through the added traffic and congestion, as well as constant noise that nearby residents and pre-existing businesses will have to deal with. Regardless of all the efforts made and measures offered by the developer, there truly is no satisfactory mitigation within the scope of this project for any of these issues. This aspect in itself makes the decision that much more important for all voting parties. The parcel in question is far better suited for an appropriately sized office building, a fast food restaurant, or even a vehicle repair facility. All of these examples will generate less traffic and significantly less noise. Yes, even an automobile repair facility, and better suit the residents. And I would have to strongly disagree with some of this. I think an automobile repair shop would have excessive noise and exhaust fumes that I would not want to be living next to. And the topic of a fast food restaurant has come up a couple of times tonight. And that was my first thought about what the worst possible thing could go in there. I'm very familiar with fast food restaurants in the area because I have several grandsons of an age that would love to frequent as many times as possible. The closest ones, to my knowledge, to that site are Checkers down on Transit in Walden, and McDonald's over on Broadway across from the D&L Plaza. So it's certainly conceivable that a fast food joint might want to move in there. And my concern about other types of businesses moving in is that they may not need variances other than the request for a .94 acre variance. And they may not be, I'm pretty sure they won't be as amenable and as conciliatory as this project has offered with all of the concessions and all of the benefits to the gentleman next door, the tax business, and to the community. And Sean, I asked you recently to help me understand the impact of this 192-foot extension of the left turn lane southbound on Central. And my understanding from the picture is that the left turn lane is going to extend north to what is a paper street, Round Street?
If you want.
Roundwood, thank you.
Yep, I'm just going to show this real quick. Because this is the plan I handed out, by the way, the full-size copy. And they just want 2 seconds just to give an explanation of what you looked at.
Yeah, so you can see the left turn lane now starts maybe about halfway up our property. So we're extending that, as mentioned, about 192 feet. So that turn lane is now going to start right about in the middle of that paper street. That was at Erie County Highway's request for us to try to fit 1 to 2 vehicles in that turn lane that would want to turn in here. So that's kind of how we determined how far back we had to extend it. And then further discussion with Erie County Highway was regarding the taper length. That's out of the standard highway manual for how long that has to be, 204 feet. And that's where we came to the conclusion that we would have to widen that road just by a couple feet.
Move the curb.
Well, move the curb and widen.
Right, the pavement.
They're both go hand in hand there.
Right.
Just for a very short stretch there. So it's very, very minimal impact there, but that was just to ensure that we have a 12-foot wide lane, as the county requested as well.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, and again, I appreciate the drawing because it really made it easier to visualize what we were looking at. And I think that will help. I think that will make the traffic actually better than it is right now, even with the addition of the car wash. I have observed that intersection at various times of the day, and sometimes traffic is backed way up, and sometimes there's only a couple of cars sitting there. And this is a very sensitive topic, again, I understand. But I think the addition of the 192 feet will allow cars that want to turn left to move over there without having to sit in a long line, thereby actually shortening the line of cars trying to go straight. I did discuss this with a Lancaster resident who lives off Pleasant View, who had a concern about the traffic. And so I explained to him what I just mentioned about the 192 feet, and where it would be. And he said that he thought, his opinion was that it would actually be a mitigation rather than a problem. Also, this project calls for the demolition of the existing building, presumably, again, I saw somewhere in the paperwork, other businesses that have inquired about moving in there would be utilizing the existing building, is that correct?
Yes, and Tim has gotten inquiries as recently as 3 days ago.
Okay, what kind of businesses?
You want it, Tim? I mean,
Yeah.
go ahead.
I've gotten a lot of fast food over the years.
Including ones you would know.
Ones that we've quoted, the traffic counts. I have relationships with the owners, and I've asked them to write me emails indicating what the traffic are, and I've shared most of them. Most of them have gone to the side since I am under a lease right now with the gentleman from Classy Chassis slash car wash. I would say at least once a month for the last 9 months. I get phone calls for smoke shops because they are popping up everywhere. They're very, very profitable. We have a lot of them at our convenience stores. And people, every call I get, they're chasing the traffic at that intersection. There's 35,000 cars a day, and that's what they're interested in.
Used cars. We've heard from used cars.
I
Used cars.
have 2 offers to lease it as a smoke shop, and I have 2 gentlemen that are ready to make offers for car lots. So, my boss is not one of you. You've seen the development he's done on Walden Avenue. He does not have an interest in being, he just doesn't. You know, it's probably a $650,000 or $700,000 piece of property, the 2 of them together. He does not want to use it for that.
Do you have any idea what the operating hours of a typical smoke shop are? I have no idea.
I can tell you the ones in the stores that we supply gasoline into operate from 8 o'clock in the morning until 10 or 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the standalone ones that probably aren't.
One of our biggest dealer put it in perspective for me. We were debating whether he was going to put food service or a smoke shop, and he said, Tim, if I have a fast food counter that does $350,000 worth of business, I'm going to make $15,000 to $20,000 net profit. And if I put a smoke shop in that does $350,000, I'm going to make $100,000 to $120,000. That's why you're seeing them on every corner, because they're all selling, you know, many times, well,
higher margin.
Yeah, it's all high margin. It's, you know, and that is by far the #1 call that I get. And I'm more than happy to share the offers that I think I actually have shared an offer that I received from Howard Saperson from Saperson Real Estate to lease the property. That was the most recent one. And his client is very, very persistent.
And that would be for a smoke shop?
That would be for a smoke shop. And they will take it as is, where is, and they are, yeah.
And a gas station was in there originally, right?
Yes.
We bought it from Unimart.
Oh, yeah, I remember Unimart.
And keep in mind too, we still have a remediation project. We took about 1,000 tons of petroleum impacted soil off the site when we removed the underground storage tanks, and we still have some significant impacts to the site that we're going to have when it's redeveloped that we're going to have to address when we go into the ground. The DEC is not requiring any further action right now, but as soon as we dig for a foundation or something of that nature, that all changes.
So is there any chance that a gas station would ever move in there again?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we currently supply fuel into about 150 gas stations between here and Albany, and that is and we were restricted for 4 years with our sale to Marathon from operating one on that site, but it has been discussed a number of times.
Okay. All right, thank you. And I was remiss in reading the letters from the community regarding this project. There is one more from, is it Renee Rem? Is that
Yes, I believe it is, yes.
Okay. All right. And he is at 3630 Walden Avenue.
She.
Oh, she. Okay, thank you. Thank you for taking the time to read this letter and all the previous correspondences. I am writing this letter to state that our position remains the same. In our opinion, by allowing the variances to be approved, we expect our property to incur financial harm, similar to the homeowner whose home is now a parking lot next to the Tim Hortons at Walden and Central. In making your decision, we ask you to consider whether an undesirable change will be produced in the character of the neighborhood or detriment to nearby properties will be created by the granting of the variance. Again, it is our opinion that given that the car wash is just 30 feet from the back of the building and 10 feet from the property line is just too close, causing the above criteria not to be met. Would you buy a building so close to a car wash? I ask that the board take this into consideration and not approve the variance so close to the building. again, if I could help it, I wouldn't buy a house so close to any business. But do you have any response to?
As you know, we've had some differing opinions from different members of that family. I think we've
Yes.
talked about the unique situation, and I believe that's a letter from the elderly mom, and that's fine. We respect her opinion. But I want to note, we originally offered those other amenities, the acoustic sound block, replacing the windows, all the fencing, based on their support for the project. It sounds like some of the family members may no longer support it. We're still offering those.
Okay.
Meaning, we're not conditioning it. We're still going to make all those improvements.
She doesn't actually live in that.
No. And remember, the improvements are going to benefit.
Accounting office.
Right.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
So
Nobody lives.
right, so she is the wife of the current owner, an elderly gentleman. Their son is the current accountant who operates the business, who we've made those plans with.
It'll benefit from
Yes. And I will again say, the noise from the car wash will be low, the noise levels from the car wash will be lower than the noise levels in their existing conditions when that gas station was operating, with all of the condensing units and air conditioners running 24/7. That gas station, when it operated as Unimart, was open 24 hours a day.
All right, yeah, I wouldn't want to see that again. Okay, anyone on the board have any other questions? Okay, are there people in the audience that would like to ask questions or express their concerns? Okay, would you come up to the microphone and give us your name and address, please?
Good evening, John Armstrong, 378 Central Avenue. I will be right directly across from this driveway that they're going to put in. I'm going to try to not take too long with this. The noise, was there a sound study done on the blowers that blow the car down? Does anybody?
The
information's been submitted about that.
How many decibels?
Tim, do you remember? The decibels of the blowers are reading.
About 55 decibels.
Okay. Traffic, yeah, anybody making a left out of there it's suicide to come out of there. I live directly across from there. I cannot even make a left onto Central Avenue going the opposite direction due to the traffic that backs up from the high school all the way up to Walden. So anybody coming out of there, it's asking for another accident. As somebody here did mention about how many accidents there were in the last year, I've said last time that I was here, this year alone, I've recorded 6 accidents alone directly in front of my house, which was going to be right in front of that driveway. I'm on the corner lot of Markey in Central, which is only going to be, maybe 50 feet away from their driveway opposing. So people making a left, people making a right, you're asking for trouble there. I believe she had mentioned that cars to go through the tunnel are going to be 1 to 2 minutes average going in and out. If there is a backup for somebody to come out onto Central Avenue, at 1 to 2 minute rate, she said 60 cars per minute. You back that up time over time, those gaps are going to get filled, and there is going to be a line through their tunnel out possibly to the other end. She made the comment that people aren't going to want to go into their car wash because the line's too long, but people will stay in that line considering they're getting a free car wash through a membership. They're going to wash their car 3 times a week. I do the same thing. But they're going to sit on Central. As Tim Hortons, when their peak hours, traffic builds up onto Walden. I mean, you're a sitting duck on Walden waiting to get coffee at Tim Hortons. If you're waiting in line to get into this car wash, you're a sitting duck as well too. And that's my opinion on it. And the pollution, yep, there's going to be running cars, noise. The high school track runners run every day during school, and they run right to the corner of Walden and Central. Now you're going to put them in harm's way with cars lined up at the end of the road and cars trying to come in and out of there. And they're not in a group, they're not in a pack. It's 1, 2, 5, 12, 30 of them at a time. And they run back and forth. That's their path. They've done it for years. That's my opinion on that as well too. And as far as house values, I disagree. I do believe it will affect the value of my house per se. I'm directly across from it. So you look out my bedroom window and living room window, I'm looking right at a car wash. Nonetheless, cars pointing right at me coming out. Nobody in their right mind would want to buy a house at the value of what it would be today versus what it would be if there was a car wash in there. Nobody's going to want to do that. So that to me will affect the value of my home. I also have a rental above, and try and fill a rental apartment where it's already somewhat noisy now is difficult, and people know that they can't make a left out of there onto Central Avenue. That it still, for me, is going to be just as difficult, if not more, to try to find a tenant to take this place when they come and look at it and see, oh crap, there's a car wash right in front of them. They're going to walk away, as I probably would too, and some of you may as well too. Last but not least, I do agree that something should go in that corner. It is an eyesore. It's got graffiti on it already. I've seen myself, kids in the back corner, let's just say they're doing drugs or maybe they're playing Monopoly. I don't know, but they don't need to be there. So yes, something does need to be there. I don't think a car wash is the place to put, I don't think that's the place to put a car wash. I do agree that it should be in a more commercial area, more industrial area, not right up against houses. As some of them are, some of them aren't. I agree with that, but in my case, I disagree with it. That's really all I have to ask.
Can I just ask you, do you have some thoughts about what you might like to see go in there?
I'm all for, I mean, I was there when it was a Unimart. I never had a problem with it. I mean, but Unimart did have entrance and exit onto Walden as well, too.
Yeah, I guess,
Yeah, a
knowing
smoke
that,
shop, yeah,
knowing
sure.
that anything is going to be
It's the
limited
noise,
to...
too. I don't, and I'm sorry if I sound harsh like this, those blowers do make noise. I said this before, I work in industry. They make noise. Whatever the sound decibel readings they've gotten, I'm standing there alone today with, I brought my decibel reading equipment from work as well as an app on the iPhone, and they were ironically within 1 decibel off from each other. And during peak traffic at 5:30 today, it was 52 decibels. Add on another 50 decibels, but I do not believe that a blower that's going to blow your car off is less than that, if not more noisy. And last time when we spoke, you said it'd be on the low. If you get a lot of customers complaining that their cars aren't getting dried, you're going to turn that blower up higher just to satisfy your customers. That's my opinion.
Amy, do you have, and this probably was covered earlier, but I may not remember, have some data on how many cars we could expect to go through there in an hour on average?
The car wash itself?
Yes.
On average, it's about 17 to 20.
Okay,
And like I said, the maximum would be 60 cars in an hour.
okay.
And the maximum is that, because that's the most it could process through is Easement.
Right, but,
Which never happened.
no, I can't imagine that
She
it,
has a breakdown per hour if you want to see it.
Yeah, we've done counts at similar car washes.
yeah, just a rough idea to address the concern that it's going to be winding into the street,
No,
the
so-
line.
So the other concern there always is with car washes is, stacking, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a problem that I think we can all agree no longer exists with these standalone car washes. We're showing 35 stacking spaces, meaning if you pulled it in that last stacking space, you're saying, I don't mind waiting 35 minutes for my car to be washed. I drive by these all the time, including those 10 or 15 days a year when they're busy, and I don't believe I've ever seen a Royal Wash, Classy Chassis, or one of the standalones backed up into the street. And part of that's because you now have a code requirement of a lot of spaces where older municipal zoning codes didn't have.
But it can back. It can.
It won't back into the street.
Yeah.
But you can't guarantee
The other
it.
thing
Yeah,
is,
pretty much.
There's not an example of one
Exactly.
looking at the traffic in this area and which direction people are coming from and going to, we don't anticipate a lot of traffic to and from the north on Central. So I don't see a lot of traffic stacking in that left turn lane, which is why the county agreed to 2 vehicles of stack for that. And any traffic that would be exiting that would back up would be on their site, so it wouldn't affect the traffic on Central.
Why don't you anticipate any coming from, or as much coming from north? Just curious.
It's based on the traffic volumes of where people live and where employment centers are, and where traffic is coming from and going to now. And like I said earlier, the majority of the traffic that would come to and from this site is pass-by traffic, so it's already on Walden and Central. It's traffic that's going from one place on Walden to another place, towards Transit or north on Central. They're already going there. But now this car wash is a convenience for them, so they'll turn in and out of the driveway.
So there's 2,000 students roughly in the school, and then there's staff there as well. You don't think any of those people are going to use the car wash?
Sure, yeah.
They'd be coming from the north to
Yeah.
get there, right?
And they get repeat car washes with their memberships.
Yeah,
Yes, they're going to
just
go in there
curious.
3 days a week.
And not 2,000 of them do not drive. At least I hope they don't.
Yeah, we
It's
figured
doubled over the
approximately
years.
20% of the traffic would come from the north.
Okay, I was just curious why you were making
Yeah.
that statement.
And again, in the traffic study, we looked at the PM commuter peak time period and the Saturday midday peak time period, because that's when the car wash will have the most impact on the most traffic on the roads.
Yep.
You're talking about a school peak that's 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
Which is when you said your peak hours were 11.
Ours ends at 2.
Well, you can't control when you get your car wash.
There's a breakdown per hour.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And that was prepared by Amy Day.
That's from a splash car wash that's located at the intersection of Greece and Long Pond out in the Rochester area. And those two roadways have as much, if not more, traffic than Walton.
Okay, all right, I'm just going to pass it around to the board. Thank you. Thank you, sir, for taking the time to...
Can I just say one more thing?
Absolutely.
Again, it's all been said, don't anticipate, it's not possible, but anything is possible for traffic. It can generate more than they anticipate, it could generate a lot less, but just keep in mind, it can be more than what is being said.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time. Hello.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Karcher, and I live on Iroquois Avenue in Lancaster, about 2 blocks away from this proposed car wash. Most of the concerns have been touched. First off, the traffic flow at the small intersection. Don't tell me it's not going to have a negative impact, because the Tim Hortons and the NOCO gas station always back out onto Walden Avenue. Traffic is going to be backing out into Central Avenue, waiting to get in to this car wash. It's going to happen. It's inevitable. If 10 to 2 is the peak busy time, what about a school day when the buses are running? High school and middle school get out around that time. So that's going to also have a negative impact. Cars holding on Central. And then it's only going to make more cut-through traffic on our side streets for people trying to get up to Walden to make a turn to get onto Central to get into. So now you're going to cause harm to our quality of life, because we have small kids in our neighborhood. Okay, so that's a big concern. What about the impact on our water pressure? What's that going to do to our water pressure in that neighborhood? And I'm thinking specifically to that fire they had on Pleasant View about 2 or so years ago, where the water pressure was so low that the fire department could not get enough to combat that fire. That's a big concern in our neighborhood. The drain on our electric. What's that going to do to the power? Is there enough power grid there to support a car wash? Really? The sewers. Can the sewers hold the runoff water from a car wash? Where's that water going to go? Into everybody's basements? The noise, and don't tell me you're not going to hear the noise, because I've been through car washes. They're loud. I've been by them. They're loud. Again, it was a former gas station. They may have removed the holding tank, but what's that going to do to the groundwater when now you're putting in all this extra drainage water from a car wash? The fumes from the increased traffic, and probably from that car wash. And for the record, the Classy Chassis in Williamsville, I work right by there. There's countless accidents in front of there with the rescue squad on a regular basis. You don't even bother going down that section of Main anymore, because traffic's hanging out into the roadway. If this car wash really wants to come to Walden, or to Lancaster, go further down Walden near pavement. There's all that empty space. It would be an easier in and out access. And yes, car people do have love affairs with their car washes right now. It's a current fad. How long does that last before then that parcel is just going to sit empty again? And that's pretty much all my concerns.
Okay. Thank you very much. Matt, do you have any response to the concerns about the water pressure, the electric, the drainage?
They'd have to do engineering on it.
Most and all the utility companies would require analysis and permitting to support the occupancy that's being built.
Okay, is that something that's been...
We actually, our original design was different than this, but we did prepare fully engineered drawings. We submitted them to Erie County Sewer for their typical review, Erie County Water Authority for their typical review, as well as Ed Schiller, the town engineer, for his stormwater review. I want to point out, we got approvals from both Erie County Sewer and Erie County Water. Obviously, now we have to go back because the whole design's changed, but that means the sewers, yes, they can handle this runoff. The water, there is sufficient water pressure, more than sufficient in this area. So just to address those concerns, even though, and the drainage will be underground too, which you know, that's reviewed not only by Ed, but because we're on a DOT road, it's going to the state drainage system. The state will also review that drainage as well. So even though these aren't really, these are more site plan issues, I just wanted you guys to know that they have been addressed in the past, and we will do it again, but they were approved previously.
I think I already know the answer to this, but is there any sustainability component of this project? Are you doing any sustainability for this project? Are you going for any lead points? Are you going for any lead certification?
None. It's under an acre, so we don't, you know, we're not required to perform any stormwater treatment, just stormwater retention. So that's really what we'll be doing.
Okay.
It will improve stormwater compared to what's there today. There's no system.
Yes, there's no detention on site, so it's running freely into the sewers now. So if anything, this will be an improvement to the sewers, because it will be containing water rather than. And another point is that site is all impervious area now. We're adding green space to the site, which also reduces the amount of runoff. So that it's going to be a huge improvement to the sewers, I should say. So.
Thank you. Any other comments from the audience? Come on up.
The sound decibel thing. You said you've submitted that. Am I allowed to know what those readings were? You said you submitted.
We would share any. You weren't obviously involved early in the process. We'll share any.
It doesn't matter, but I'm here now. So
yeah, we'll share everything we know.
Okay, what is it? What was your actual reading?
Oh, I don't. Tim has done all the readings. I don't remember off the top of my head.
At the site on Walden Avenue.
And the readings from the blowers, I think is what you're asking, right?
Yep.
At the Class C chassis on Main. You took it at one of them. Yep. We'll share it.
You took it during her meeting in March when you went.
I also want to note, sir, that if we get the approval tonight, we're not done. We have to come back for all the technical details of the planning board.
And let's not forget that we have to abide by the noise ordinance of the town, which means we cannot exceed the background noise level by more than 5 decibels, regardless of what it is. And if that means, you know, we have to take mitigation measures, that's what we have to do. We cannot operate that facility if it exceeds the background noise level by 5 decibels.
And that is in the code.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. If you give us your email, we'll share that information.
One more thing I'd like to add. How many more car washes do we need around town? There's one on every corner practically. I mean, really, it is kind of ridiculous. And for the record, most of my neighbors are also heavily against this project. And unfortunately, you're competing with the Metallica concert right now, so I came solo. So at the next meeting, I'm sure there'll be more people from our neighborhood. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, any further questions or comments from the board? There being none, would anyone like to make a motion?
Can I just make a comment too? Before you guys vote, remember you're voting just on the variances, not the...
I'm sorry, Emily, would you say that again?
You're voting only on the variances, not the project in its entirety. Like they said, it still needs to go to the planning board, so
yes,
the vote is just for these variances.
Just for the 6 requested variances. Understood. Thank you. I'll make the motion. Whereas the Zoning Board of Appeals of the Town of Lancaster has made the following findings: that no undesirable change will be produced in the character of the neighborhood by the granting of the area variance relief sought, that no detriment to nearby properties will be created by the granting of the area variance relief sought, that the benefit sought by the applicant cannot be achieved by some other method feasible for the applicant to pursue other than the area variance relief sought. that the requested area variance relief is not substantial, that the proposed area variance relief will not have an adverse effect or impact on the physical or environmental conditions in the neighborhood or district, that the alleged difficulty is self-created, but not to the extent necessary to preclude the granting of the area variance relief sought, that this board has taken into consideration the benefit of to the applicants if the variance relief sought is granted, as weighed against the detriment to the health, safety, and welfare of the neighborhood or community by such grant. That within the intent and purposes of this ordinance, the variance relief sought, if granted, is the minimum variance necessary to afford relief.
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Michaely, thank you. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Dorenzo.
No.
Mr. Michaely.
Yes.
Mr. Storr.
No.
Mr. Sugg.
No.
Mr. Tillmans.
I am abstaining from this vote because I am a family member of the neighbor next door to the proposed car wash.
Okay. And Ms. Monticelli.
Yes.
So it failed.
Okay, the variances are denied.
Oh, yeah, the other thing, does that mean you're denying all of them, or should you vote on some of them separately?
I asked that last time, and we were told that we're voting on all of them.
But I mean, that means you're denying you can't build anything in less than an acre.
There would have to be a new variance request if you have another proposal.
They had one.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, I think I'll get a refill.
5-minute break?
No, we're just going to grab some water. Unless, does anyone need a break?
Nope. Nope. Only 5 minutes.
I wouldn't mind.
Do you mind if I take a quick bathroom break? I'm on the next one as well.
Oh, are you? No, you know what, we're all
quick,
taking
okay.
breaks, so we're adjourning for 5 minutes for a quick break. We'll be back at 9:55. No. 8:50. No, 9:55. Wishful thinking.
Yeah, there goes my
days, 2 days, and 1.
Two, yes. It has to be 4.
What
right?
else can we get done? I mean, there's nothing else we can get done.
He's absent.
3 no's. Yep, 3 no's.
Right.
And reversed.
And even if he was, yeah, and even if he was here.
Yeah.
Right. Did she say how long?
Yeah, these are my. I do need more stuff.
Yeah, I apologize.
What's the matter?
Because it's authorization, what are we?
That didn't come from me. Well, it's, I get it. I understand. We just try to make it accurate, that's all.
I'm still sending things to my paralegal at first.
I understand. I understand.
Night.
Night. I tried to get, Keith came to visit me this morning, and I was in the middle of a disaster.
Almost got jumped in the hall.
He knows a family member of his.
Tomorrow's going to be impossible for me, but I will get somebody on
Yeah,
site
just set it up
to take care of it prior to. I'm more concerned the thermal envelope portion of it, and to find the rough framing. I can't even remember what the inspection here, but we have to look at something.
A couple minutes.
What's up?
Yeah, we got 5 minutes.
Yeah, would you please? Yeah.
No. Well, let's know.
Wait,
We're still waiting.
you're not supposed to listen. You're not supposed to listen to people. But I'm just gonna listen to this person and he told me, wait, are we listening to people or aren't we? I'm not sure. Exactly. Yeah, that place can fall. Oh. Wizard just told me that. Good for him.
Said 5-minute break, right?
Huh?
Said 5-minute break?
Yeah, 9:55.
It's way off my timing, Keith. I know. Said 2:05. It's way off.
I would hammer that over.
I don't
You said
know.
over under.
I said 9:05 was my guess. Before time we would leave. I'd figure the first 9 in an hour.
And then you get hey, come on. This is a
Oh, yeah. That's what you get.
I mean, not really.
At the end of the day, I'm trying to do
I'd be up all night.
It's decaf.
Oh, okay.
It's warmed up this afternoon. Still. It's decaf.
something.
So, I need it.
No.
Okay, we're resuming the Zoning Board of Appeals meeting after a quick break. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Jeff Palumbo. I'm the attorney for the applicant. I'm here with Mr. Pandolfi again from Carmina Wood Design.
Diane, excuse me, do we need to have you read anything?
It's up to you. It's been adjourned, it hasn't changed. It's up to you.
No, I think we're good. I'm sorry,
Great,
sir.
thank you. So I know you would like to hear from me for the next couple of hours, but I will try to minimize that time. Just quickly, the history of the development itself. We filed a rezoning petition back in August of 2021. In September of 2021, the town board designated itself as lead agent and conducted a coordinated review. In January of 2002, the planning board recommended the negative declaration and recommended approval of the rezoning request, and I'll go into a little more detail on that. In March of 2022, the Planning Board directed us to apply for the variances before they would make a recommendation on the site plan itself. In April of 2022, we filed the Zoning Board of Appeals application for the variances, and in June of 2022, the Town Board did issue a negative declaration, putting us in a position to move forward with the Zoning Board of Appeals today. So the request before the Town Board is for a rezoning of the parcel from general commercial to multiple family, multiple use. That would allow us to build a mixed-use facility that you see on the site plan in front of you. So what we're proposing is actually a 45-foot mixed-use 3-story building with retail on the first floor and apartments on the second and third. And again, my former colleague, Ari Goldberg, presented this to you with Mr. Pandolfi at a prior meeting, so I won't go into any great detail about that. But there's also a 2,000 square foot bank on this parcel as well. So this is the mixed-use building, and that is the bank. So why are we here? We're here for 3 variances. One is with respect to the side yard setback. We are, go ahead, yes. There's 25 foot required, and we are proposing a setback of roughly half of that. It's 12.42, and that is the proposed loading area of the site. The second variance is with respect to the height of the building. In the MFMU district, the height restriction is 35 feet, and we are proposing 45.42 feet in height. The third variance is the distance between the 2 buildings. The code requires a 30-foot separation between the 2 buildings. We are proposing a 15-foot separation with a 5-foot sidewalk and then 5 feet of green space on either side of the sidewalk. And that will allow the sidewalk residents to access the rear parcel as well. So there won't be any driveways or anything like that in there. It's just the sidewalk and green space.
If I could, please, sir?
Sure.
So does that change the dimension at all? Or you're putting that sidewalk within the 15?
Within that 15 feet.
Okay.
Yeah, in the middle, 5 feet, and then on each side of that, a 5-foot green space.
Because I don't have the paperwork in front of me, I want to make
Yeah,
sure.
that's fine. And as you're all very familiar, as I've listened all evening, you'll know that the factors very well, the benefit to the applicant versus the detriment to the health, safety, and welfare of the neighborhood or community. And we have submitted a very detailed application that sets forth all the various factors and discussed in great detail. I'll go through them briefly if you'd like me to, but before I do that, I just wanted to point out a few important points that I think are worthy of your consideration. Number one is the proposed use is consistent with the town comprehensive plan, and I think that's very important. And we pointed that out to both the planning board and the town board, and we cited 3 instances in the comprehensive plan that would indicate that this plan is in conformity with the comprehensive plan. Number one is the plan recommends that the town consider zoning changes to encourage multifamily housing along public transit corridors and near available services. That is exactly what we have here. Number two, and this language is right out of the comprehensive plan, it also recommends the town facilitate redevelopment in areas where growth is desired, villages and the western portion of the town, through streamlined zoning provisions and simplified procedures. And third, ensure that the zoning classifications that allow higher density development are located in areas where sanitary service is available. So we meet those 3 criteria right on point in all 3 cases. Mr. Ficcione, in his August 20th, 2021 letter, agreed, stating that the request does align with the comprehensive plan for redevelopment of areas to promote growth of retail, other mixed uses, and higher densities. The third important point that I wanted to bring to the board's attention is the issue of DOT. We're on Transit Road, obviously controlled by the State Department of Transportation. They indicated in their September 29th, 2021 letter that the proposed project will not have a significant impact to traffic on the state highway system. And clearly that was brought up during the discussion with the town board in terms of the negative declaration that they eventually issued. We have submitted an appraisal report from Northeastern that was dated July 22nd of this year, which also concluded that the variances will not have any additional adverse effect than what already exists. And I'm going to go into a little more detail on that, because that's really the most important issue in my mind, and has been since the very beginning. The fifth point is the town board, as I've already indicated, on June 6th, issued a negative declaration concluding that the project is not likely to have significant impact. So the issue of the height, I have maintained from the very beginning that it doesn't make any difference if this proposed building is 25 feet, 35 feet, 55 feet, or 100 feet. You cannot see the plaza behind us, and Mr. Ingrassia, who owns the plaza, is here this evening with his attorney, and we've had discussions on this. We clearly have a difference of opinion. If you drive south on Transit, you can't see that plaza until you get by the Forest View restaurant. If you drive north on Transit, you can see it. The restaurant has nothing to do with the view moving north. So, as we pointed out in the appraisal, cars sit primarily 4 to 5 feet off the ground. So anybody driving by on Transit is looking at the Forest View restaurant now. They can't see the plaza behind it. They can't see it until they get by it. Then you can see it. It's going to be the exact same thing once we're done, because we're primarily within the same footprint. So again, it doesn't matter if it's 35 feet or 45 feet. The view is the same. A couple of things that I think are important that I wanted to point out regarding my opponent's, if I use that word, claims. Mr. Knopf, the attorney for Mr. Ingrassia, submitted a letter on July 1st, 2022. And he said, while the applicant attempted to justify its variances based upon its claim that its project would be more profitable than its existing restaurant, that is not a valid basis for granting the variances. Rather, increasing profitability and competitiveness does not sufficiently establish significant economic injury to justify an area variance. The problem with that is we're not required to show economic injury for area variances. They have cited a case that is from 1985. The law changed, as you all know, in 1992. At one point in time, before the law changed to consider the benefit versus the detriment, you did have to show practical difficulties. You did have to show hardship for area variances. And therefore, you had to show economic injury. That is not the case anymore, and it changed in 1992, so the case that they cited is irrelevant. It's meaningless. It's a different standard that was in place at that period of time. So increasing profitability and competitiveness are absolutely relevant factors. In fact, I cited a case in Hampshire Management Company versus Nadell, which is a 1997 case. Under the new law, the court held that the variance granted to the applicant in that case was premised on a need for expansion to stay competitive with rival businesses, and the court found that to be appropriate. And the reason why that's important is the reason why we're here to begin with. The restaurant industry is in trouble. It was in trouble before the pandemic, and it's much worse now. And it doesn't help that a local radio station is indicating to its listeners that this is a done deal, that it's all been approved. What has happened with that, and this has been on several times, that there's a mass exodus of employees from the restaurant who think that they're not going to be around next week, so they're gone. It's difficult to get employees to begin with. And when we have to deal with that situation, it makes it even worse. But that's just an exacerbation of the problems. The problem existed before the radio station made its great announcement, incorrect announcement. We don't have employees, we don't have the customers that we used to have. Something is going to happen on that site, and it's not going to be a restaurant. So we believe that the comprehensive plan supports this, and I think we're on all 4 points in terms of the comprehensive plan. I did want to point out a couple of things in their appraisal, the Cushman-Wakefield report that they submitted. I think there were several incorrect and misleading statements that I wanted to address. Number one is that they indicated that the reciprocal easement agreement, which we have with the Tops Plaza and Mr. Ingracia's property, there's a reciprocal easement agreement for access to the site through our northern driveway and through here, through Mr. Ingracia's. They've indicated that, or they've implied that there's a restriction for restaurant use only in that agreement. I'm not sure that that's what they intended to say, but when you read it, it seems to indicate that that's the implication, but it's not. There is no restriction that this be used for restaurant only. Number two is a claim is made in the report that changes in the design are going to place a burden for additional costs to be borne by the plaza owner. And again, there's nothing in the report to support that contention. Nothing in the report indicates dollars and cents, what's going to change, what's going to be more expensive. There's nothing to support that statement. Third, they've claimed that the setback variance will have an adverse influence on traffic patterns within the property and along Transit Road. And again, we know that that's not the case. We are not restricting access pursuant to the reciprocal easement agreement, and the DOT has concluded that the project is not likely to have a significant impact on their highway system. So that is another one that's incorrect. They also claim that the development is out of character. They make that claim several times with the town comprehensive plan, and we've discussed that, where I disagree with that wholeheartedly. They finally made a statement that I think goes to the crux of the matter. They indicate on page 16 that the subject property shields the strip center from view from Transit Road in its existing condition. They admit that in their report. That's the whole point. It already restricts it. Whether it's 35 feet or 45 feet, that situation isn't going to change. So we are not altering the essential character of the neighborhood by putting up a 45-foot building. We're just not. Anyone who has gone out there and actually taken the time to drive this both north and south, I think will agree. It doesn't change anything. So I will just briefly discuss the factors and invite any questions that you might have with me, but as I've indicated, we went into great detail in the application on all of the different factors. So I would ask basically if you have any questions rather than me taking up any more of your time at 10 after 10.
Okay, thank you. Anyone? No, we're not going to do that. Okay. So I don't remember where we left off. So Mr. Dorenzo, you want to take it?
Thank you, Madam Chair. What is the length of the building and the two structures?
The length of this building?
Yes.
It's 126, 101 back here before the jog, and then 45 feet wide here, 70 feet wide there.
And the existing facilities, how long?
It's, Jeff mentioned this very briefly, it's basically the same footprint. Actually, the existing building extends a little bit further south, and this extends a little bit further north.
Okay, so
but it's basically where the restaurant is now, that's where this building is going.
Okay. And, all right, and the height is obviously what you're here for, one of the variances.
Correct, one of the three variances.
Okay, no further questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Dorenzo. Okay, Mr. Michael.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've looked at this project from every different angle, literally. I mean, you know, in the street, across the street, different parts of transit. And I agree with the statement that regardless of the height of the building, the back building is obstructed, whether it's 1 story or 3 stories, and I brought that up last time. That's all. That's my only comment.
Thank you, Mr. Michael. Mr. Storr?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No questions.
Thank you, Mr. Storr. Mr. Sugg?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No questions.
Thank you, Mr. Sugg. Mr. Tillmans?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no questions.
Thank you, Mr. Tillmans. I've made the same observation as Mr. Michael. I go by there a lot anyways, but when we got this variance request, I went out and looked at it, and then when we got the concern of the plaza owner, I went out there again thinking, well, maybe I missed something, but yeah, heading south on Transit, with the current Forest View restaurant, you don't see the other businesses in the plaza until you've passed by, and heading north on Transit, you see them. I don't see the difference that a 35-foot or 45-foot building's going to make to visibility of those other businesses either way. I do have a question about the bank. Is this, the front of the bank is going to be facing Transit?
Correct.
Okay. And is there a drive-through?
Yes.
Okay, so
You
the
wanna
drive-through
point
is going to
there?
be on the north side
So
or
the
the south side?
drive-through's gonna come through the back on the east side of the building.
If I remember correctly, it was primarily a drive-through bank, right?
Yes.
Yeah, just primarily. It will also be, a standard bank, but it's a 2,000 square foot building.
Minimal amount of
Very small bank.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
By bank
I
standards.
believe it's gonna be very few employees in there, but it is available if people do go in there. Not, I don't think many people do nowadays anyway, but it is there.
And we actually do have the tenant who's been chomping at the bit to have this proceed, the bank.
Bank?
The bank.
What bank is it?
You're not on, you're not at.
I think George did say this, but I don't know for sure.
It's been, I think
Big
it's
on-
public knowledge. It's public knowledge.
It's down.
It's been,
It's Bank on Buffalo.
I think the radio station.
They did say it, right. They did.
I missed all that on the radio. And will you maintain the driveway that is, it would be on the north side of the Forest View?
Correct.
Okay.
That's staying as.
That seems to be very helpful.
One thing that did come out of, our meeting with the planning board in regards to seeking a negative declaration was, this will be a right-out only. You have to cross 2 lanes and a left turn lane on the left there. So that was kind of the agreement we came on to, that it would be a right-out only.
No left turn out of there.
Yeah, no left.
Okay.
You couldn't just extend it?
Extended 182 feet?
Madam Chair, may I ask one more question?
Yes, please.
Are you any closer, and I'm sure we're going to find this out in a second or two, but are you any closer to a resolution with the neighboring tenant?
I indicated to Mr. Ingrassia this evening that no matter what happens here today, we will continue discussions on proposed settlement and resolution. We have provided them information. They've asked for additional information, and I think the best thing for us to do is all sit in the same room with our architects and engineers and see if we can come to a resolution. We're still willing to do that.
I think the board would certainly support any resolution you can come to, so.
Yep.
None of us on this board are attorneys, so to talk about reciprocal easement agreements,
sure,
you might as well be talking another language. I know that there are members that deal in commercial real estate, and I'm sure you understand, and I did have a real estate license at one point in my life, so I understand the words, but I've never been involved in a reciprocal easement agreement before.
It sounds very exotic, but it really isn't. All it does is allow each of us to use the other person's property.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Drento. Anyone else have questions? Okay. Folks in the audience want to come up and address the board?
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. Sorry to keep you here so late, but I wasn't part of that, obviously. My name is Angelo Ingrassia, and I reside at 693 Summit Drive, and I'm the owner of the 2 properties immediately to the east of the proposed redevelopment. This includes a strip center with multiple tenants and vacancies. There's also, on the adjacent parcel that I own, 55,000 square foot Tops Friendly Markets. I'm here to oppose the requests for the variance that are being requested. I am a real estate developer and own and have developed over 3 million square feet, with Tops Friendly Markets being one of my largest customers. The reason I provide this information is to demonstrate that I am no stranger to redevelopment of commercial properties. With that said, I will say unequivocally that this redevelopment is allowed to move forward. It will significantly impact my properties. When I purchased these properties in 2016, I never thought this type of development would be sitting in front of my development, which is completely out of the character of commercial development, with commercial on one level and residential on the second level. And when you consider that scenario, when you're dealing with multiple tenants, especially national tenants, and when they see that type of a development front, they will never come to that site to consider leasing in that on that strip center. Furthermore, it's going to significantly impair my ability to release that to the current tenancies. They've already voiced a concern to that from me directly. So they've already told me they're going to have a problem with that, and I probably will not be able to renew Dollar Tree, which was one of my biggest tenants. Just give me 1 second. Sorry about that. I want you to know that working with neighbors when I redevelop a property is crucial and a must be done in good faith amongst the parties. I'm sorry to say that hasn't happened here. And unfortunately, I do not see it changing after this board encouraged it in the previous meeting. Never happened. That's one of the things that I always do when I go into a redevelopment. The first thing I do is I go sit down with my neighbors and I listen to their concerns. I look at my plan. I never even show a plan until I listen to my neighbors first. And then once I hear those concerns, then I develop a plan, bring it to them, let them give me some feedback, and I do my very best to try to accommodate their concerns in my plan. That never happened here. I even went so far in with these folks to ask to provide additional land that I own, give them, so that they could create an environment on this property that would be more conducive to everybody. I don't in any way, shape, or form want to restrict development of the site. Why would I? You're bringing more people there. If you're bringing more people there, you're going to be more people there for the tenants there. Why am I here tonight? I wouldn't be here if they would work with me, and that has not happened. This is a matter of trying to stuff 50 pounds of potatoes in a 5-pound bag, and that's what's happening here. If they were to scale back their development and make it perpendicular and make it work within the overall development so it looks like the whole scheme was created at one time, it could be a quality development. And I'm here to say that I will do my very best to help. But if they won't respond and they won't sit down and they won't communicate consistently, what else could I do? And that unfortunately is what's happened. I've submitted and received a building permit to completely renovate the facade of my strip center. And Tops just got done with their facade renovation. And obviously I've already just replaced the pylon sign. So spending more capital in this project is definitely on the radar. We will commence construction on the facade renovation in September, and that's where it is. But again, like I said, why am I here? I would never be here if this made sense. And I'm very interested in working with my neighbors, but they gotta do it in good faith, and that hasn't happened. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, evening everyone. My name is John Tantillo. I'm an attorney for Mr. Ingrassi. I'll also try to keep it brief. You know, we're just about wrapped up. So I just want to touch on the variance factors after Mr. Ingrassi kind of introduced you to, I guess, his issues with the project here. So obviously it's self-created. I think the applicant admits that in the application. They bought subject to the zoning, so self-created that factor cuts against the application. Whether or not the variances would be a detriment to the surrounding properties, we submitted an appraisal report kind of showing exactly that is what would happen here. The licensed appraiser concluded that the proposal will lower the rent levels of our client's property and increase its vacancy risk. The height variance will decrease visibility of the plaza. I know you all discussed whether or not there's some existing issues with that right now, but what will happen regardless of that is the residential use will be blocking out the view. And I think the primary issue here is that with this height variance and the residential use going in, no one will ever think that there's a commercial development behind this. No one thinks to look behind apartments to find additional commercial uses, right? If it's a purely commercial building like it is now, then it would be likely that there's more around it. But an apartment, no. We've also submitted with our own letters a letter from the TOPS tenant right now saying that they never would have moved in if this was the condition of the area when they were looking at the property. They also join us in our opposition of this application. As to whether the benefit can be achieved by another method, we're at a little bit of a loss here. The last time we were before you guys, you suggested and we agreed that we should work with the applicant to try to find a solution that works for everyone. To that end, our engineer reached out to their engineer in June, and we were largely kind of ghosted at that point. We sent some questions. We never received answers to our follow-up questions, and we have been unable to really engage in any meaningful discussion since then. We've talked with our attorney tonight, and he's indicated a willingness again to work on that, and we'd certainly be interested in that if we could. I know that there's already been some fruitful discussion of alternatives that I think would make sense. As Mr. Ingrassia pointed out, he's offered several creative solutions to keep everyone happy here, and I think there's definitely the potential to do that here. It's also obviously substantial. 3 variances, 30%, 50%, 50%. They're substantial on their own, and substantiality is also assessed collectively. So 3 variances of that amount is absolutely a substantial variance or a substantial variance application. And finally, there's just no good reason to grant this variance. The applicant stated last time and tonight that it's requesting the variances because it makes their project more profitable. And as our appraisal report shows, it doesn't just do that. It makes Mr. Ingrassia's property less profitable. And we don't think that the town should be playing favorites here, right? My client's property complies with the zoning. The town shouldn't be playing favorites and allowing one project to ignore the zoning at the expense of a code-compliant property. If that was a valid basis for a variance, then it would subsume the entire variance standard. Every time someone wants to do a bigger property or a bigger project, they can say, "Oh, well, it's bigger, so it will be more profitable." And Mr. Palumbo suggested that that's all of a sudden not the law, that's an okay reason for a variance, and that's just absolutely not the case. The board is required to grant the smallest variance possible to accomplish the desired goal, and merely just increasing profit carte blanche does not comply with that directive. And if the board has any questions, I can address those, but otherwise, thank you for your time.
Sir, can I just get your spelling of your last name?
Sure, it's John Tantillo, Tantillo.
And are you with North Shaw? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Tantillo, can you tell us how long the tenancy is for TOPS?
For Ange?
They have 4 years left. 4. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, Jill. You didn't,
Oh, that's
you didn't
okay.
ask me.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, do we have a
I
motion?
think he wants to respond.
Yeah, I just.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just need to respond to Mr. Ingrassia. I'm absolutely shocked at what I just heard about us not acting in good faith. We have met with Mr. Ingrassia and his attorney. They told us what their concerns are. We supplied our CAD information to them, which members of the town board felt was above and beyond what any other developer has ever done. We then sent them a letter on May 25th to their attorney that indicated a potential settlement. It's right here. Mr. Ingrassia offered to give us property. We took advantage of that by redrawing the dimensions and the location of the building. And we put it on a plan and we sent it to them. For them to say that we're acting in bad faith is ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. What they're asking us to do after they receive this is to design this for them. We said, here it is. You asked us to reconsider a layout. We did this. If you want to take this plan and refine it to what you're thinking you want us to do that. But I'm not going to continue to guess what you want. I put it in writing to them. So for them to stand up here today and say we're acting in bad faith makes me want to withdraw what I already said. But I won't do that. We will continue to meet with them because I said we would do that. That's number one. Number two, their appraisal we talked about. They're indicating that it makes it less profitable for them. But they don't indicate how much. Is it 1%? Is it 10%? Is it 100%? Is it 1,000%? They don't indicate that. They just conclude and give you an opinion that it's going to make it less profitable. And finally, they indicate that no one's going to know it's there because our building is there. Well, apparently nobody knows it's there now, since it's got a 50% vacancy. And our situation is not going to change that. It's not going to change it at all. So with that, I would ask the board to grant the variances. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just briefly respond to one point there?
Yes.
Just on the reference to the ongoing negotiations. The emails, like right here, I'm on my phone, I'm looking at them. The email was sent June 17th, following up on what they sent, and what is that, 2 months now, and not a response. He followed up multiple times and couldn't get an answer.
Because they haven't done anything. That's except to ask us for additional information.
Okay,
Clarifying
hopefully,
questions.
regardless of how this goes, hopefully there will be a meeting of the minds and you folks will be able to work together. Anything else? Any questions from the board?
I have one question on that redraw. Was that changing that building perpendicular?
Yeah, it did change the,
I don't know.
yeah, you can explain.
Yeah,
It wasn't
so, I mean, one comment was made was a solution that works for both of us, and a perpendicular mixed-use building does not work for us. If you're coming southbound down Transit, and this building is perpendicular to Transit, the frontage is facing southbound. So if you're driving southbound, you can't see the front. The whole point of the mixed use is to have it front the road so everybody coming both directions can see it. Coming southbound, down Transit, you see the back of the building. Plus there's, there's trees and whatnot here, and those apartments are there. Coming that way, so like a solution that works for both of us, that's not one of them. We did, however, we did propose a plan that would shift this building as far north as we could to the 40-foot required setback. So as you can see, that's really not even much more than what we, that's maybe 10, 15 feet more than what we show now. So it's really not even that big of a difference, but we did show that, and we utilized some of the property that they were willing to give us, and we did send that back. I spoke with their engineer. They sent us a CAD file of the plaza. I plopped these buildings on that CAD file where I was thinking they would go, and they came back and they wanted us to design the whole site. That's a lot of time for me. That's a lot of money for my client. If we're talking about where the buildings are going to go and the view shed, I'm not sure why we have to go through designing the whole site just to come back and say, well, I don't think we like this. If they would have given input to that, then we could have went back and forth, but there was no input to this plan received.
Will accomplish, but as you indicated, that's not what's in front of you this evening. It's just the other three variances that we're looking for on the original plan.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, do we have a motion? I will make the motion. Almost took your glasses. Whereas the Zoning Board of Appeals of the Town of Lancaster has made the following findings: that no undesirable change will be produced in the character of the neighborhood by the granting of the area variance relief sought, that no detriment to nearby properties will be created by the granting of the area variance relief sought, that the benefit sought by the applicant cannot be achieved by some other method feasible for the applicant to pursue other than the area variance relief sought, that the requested area variance relief is substantial, that the proposed area variance relief will not have an adverse effect or impact on the physical or environmental conditions in the neighborhood or district, that the alleged difficulty is self-created, but not to the extent necessary to preclude the granting of the area variance relief sought, that this board has taken into consideration the benefit to the applicants if the variance relief sought is granted as weighed against the detriment to the health, safety, and welfare of the neighborhood or community by such grant. That within the intent and purposes of this ordinance, the relief sought, if granted, is the minimum variance relief to afford, necessary to afford relief.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Storr. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Dorenzo.
No.
Mr. Michaely.
Yes.
Mr. Storr.
Yes.
Mr. Sugg.
Yes.
Mr. Tillmans.
No.
Ms. Monticelli.
Yes.
Passes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks. Good luck. Thank you for coming in. Any other board business?
Yeah, let's get the heck out of here.
Motion to adjourn?
Is that a motion,
Motion to
Carl?
adjourn?
Second.
All right. Good night.
Point of order, you have my email. Hey.
What you said. That's why you. That's why you. Oh, you.
I'll drive by.
Well. Carl was right, 6:30.